Boulder, Chieko Asakawa from CMU and IBM, Ernisa Kakori from University of Maryland, and Chris Kitani from CMU. We also had an amazing challenge this year with a lot of participation, and all was possible thanks to Zhongkai and Jimmy, who kind of ran the challenge. So I want to thank everyone. We have a really exciting set of talks today for you. There's a broad range of topics. Each talk will be approximately 20 to 25 minutes, and allowing some time for Q&A afterwards. Feel free to ask questions, Q&A on the chat, or ask here, and I'll try to kind of do this in a hybrid and efficient manner. But all the talks are going to be centered around topics related to accessibility. So we will explore frameworks related to various aspects of accessibility, from computer vision and assistive technologies, design of accessible tools and advocacy, wearable assistive navigation systems, which Smith will talk about, and up to including accessibility and disability in an undergraduate computer vision course. Our first speaker is Rainer Stiefelhagen. I hope I say it correctly.
Well, yeah, that's fine.
Great. And before I introduce him, I'll just kind of give an overview of our abstract and posters. So we have, I believe, 12 of them. I have many of them printed here, and we'll go during the poster session after the two first talks and the challenge talks. We will go and hang them, and some will be remote, some will be in person. But the good thing is that we'll have two sessions. So the plan is to have, these posters range from segmentation and key points and up to algorithms, data sets, and systems for individuals with disabilities. And there will be two poster sessions. So this gives you the opportunity to either ask questions on Zoom, if you want to do in the first poster session, and then come downstairs in the second poster session, or however you like it. Okay, great. So let me introduce our first speaker. So Rainer is a professor, holds a professorship computer systems for visually impaired students at the Faculty of Computer Science of Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. He's the head of the research area Machine Vision for Human-Machine Interaction and the Institute of Anthropomatics and Robotics and the KIT Study Center for the Visually Impaired. He received his PhD in computer science at the University of Karlsruhe in 2002. And his research is focused on developments of methods of machine vision, in particular video-based recordings of humans to enable user-friendly interactive technical systems, such as perceiving interactive robots or environments. Other areas of application for his work include computer-aided evaluation of images and image sequences for intelligence security applications, as well as assistive systems for people with special needs, especially people with blindness or visual impairment. And with that, the floor is yours. So I will stop sharing the screen.
Well, thanks a lot for the kind introduction. Let me first share
Thanks
the
for joining
screen.
us all the way from across the ocean.
So does that work? Can you see my screen?
Just a sec. I'm gonna... Yes, but let me see if I can make it a bit more full screen here. Just a sec. How do they bring it back? You see the view? Just a sec. This is
Should be in the upper right-hand corner.
yes, it just went on the,
Then
there we go. Got it.
the last one is full screen.
I think we're good now. There we go.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm very happy to connect to you, this community. Let me just, and thanks for the nice introduction. As you said, I have a professorship on in computer systems for seeing impaired students at KIT. In fact, I'm a computer vision researcher. I've been working in this area for many years and also publishing at CVPR. But since 12 years now, I'm the director of KI, our university Center for Digital Accessibility and Assistive Technology. That's the new name of our center. In fact, it's already has been there for more than 30 years. And the main work of the center is to support blind and visually impaired students at KIT, and also to develop new assistive technology and novel solutions to make things accessible. Let me say a few words about the center, and then I will go into some things we do in more detail, not too deep, but to give you an overview. So the main task of our service center is to do the service. So it's to enable students, visually impaired students, to study any subject at our university. That means we support them, we coach them, and the main work is really making literature, all the teaching materials accessible. That, just to give you an impression, we have around 30 students. It varies, of course, with low vision or blindness. That means there are something like more than 100 lectures to make accessible. All the PowerPoint slides, exams, exercises, the things you typically use when you study. And just at the right hand, you see, for example, special tactile printers we have. So each semester we print around 10,000 tactile graphics to make things also available via tactile paper. The second big area is doing research. So driven by the needs of our users, namely the students, we on our day-to-day business, we have to make things more accessible, documents. Sometimes it's also practical courses like a practicum in chemistry or physics. And then we think about how we can assist and make tools and things accessible. And also, because I don't want to read everything, we have some research in other areas that I will talk about in a minute. And the really interesting thing, I think, is that the research we do is driven, at least to a good part, by the direct needs of our service center and our users, and it flows back into the work of the service center. So we really try to use what we develop and publish, etc. So there are three main areas where we currently focus on that are driven by computer vision research. And the first area is making documents more accessible. I will talk about that in the next few minutes. The second one is building assistive technology to support mobility and orientation. And in both areas, and especially for mobility and orientation, we need to think about how to design interfaces, haptic interfaces, acoustic, multimodal interfaces. So I want to talk a little bit about it. So let me start with making documents accessible. So as you can imagine, you all know it, we work with all this lecture material, papers. So just some examples from the material that our students have to deal with. So it ranges from handwritten notes to, of course, books. And our university is technical university, lots of engineering and STEM work. You can see it, chemical formulas, math formulas, etc. In any case, a lot of visual and graphic material, also quite visible on the lecture slides here on the right. And sometimes even they get for their seminars, they have to read a newspaper article and comment on it. And as you can imagine, if you're a blind person, all of this poses some challenges to you. So our work at the service center is to make all this accessible. And in the past, first of all, I have a terrific team. Some of them have been with the service center for 20 or more years. And in the past, all of this was done manually. So we have experts who exactly know how to make this accessible. We have been working with blind and low vision persons for many, many years. And now gradually we are working on automating this process or supporting the transformation or making these documents accessible. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Just to give you an idea, if you haven't been working with blind users, you can imagine that written text can be made accessible, or just to tell you, it can be made accessible via special software that reads out what's on the screen. That's called screen reader software. And in addition, very often they work with Braille output devices where you have a line, for example, with 80 characters given out in a tactile format as Braille output. And now, but what do you do with graphical material and formulas? And in fact, LaTeX is the gold standard to work with mathematical formulas in Germany. And so we transcribe, or we make all the formulas available in LaTeX code. And in fact, we have to transform the documents really in a different way for blind users compared to persons with low vision, because a person with low vision typically works with large screens where they magnify the screens, and then we have to do then it's not LaTeX, of course, but we have to do special transformation of the fonts so that it's well readable. And of course, sometimes it includes color transformation, contrast adaptations and things like that. Here are some more examples, and you can see on the left mathematical formulas. This is in fact from a PDF. PDFs per se are not accessible for a blind person. If you haven't been taking care of making an accessible PDF, sometimes if you run a screen reader software on a PDF, it will jump around and first spell a few letters here, then a few letters there. In the worst case, big parts of what is in the PDF are just graphics. So the first thing is to think about how this can be structured and made accessible. And this is also where we can use advances in computer vision, for example, to automatically analyze the structure of the document. Where are the titles? Where are images? Where are captions? Where are formulas? Even the reading order, because so here we have a two-column paper, and it's not always so obvious what the reading order is, but we can use, of course, deep learning models to analyze it, segmentation models, machine learning to train models to detect the different classes, to segment the classes and to analyze the reading order. Of course, we use the latest models, transformer models, experiment with it, also look into speeding this up. And in the end, we include it in our transversion pipeline. Here is some more recent work by Omar Murad, who I see here also in the Zoom. It will be published this year. This is work on analyzing line charts and make them accessible. For example, by extracting all the metadata, what's on the x-axis and y-axis, and also to make these line charts later available via tactile output. So first we extract the semantics, and then we also try to extract the lines and make that available later. We can also do this for chemical formulas, which you find often in a graphical way in books. And what we can do is we take the picture, train a model to output a linear code, for example, a smile code, or there are different codes to depict chemical formulas in a linear way. And we can do this using machine learning models, transformers, recurrent models, to make this accessible. In fact, this is not only useful for blind users, but I think this is beneficial for everybody, and to make papers and document content more accessible, because then also the graphical content is searchable if we generate the metadata. Of course, also mathematical formulas we can automatically transpose into LaTeX code using basically machine learning, machine translation tools. And as we all know, this is all very similar to what we use in computer vision. And so this is just a reference, which is in fact already a few years old. In the end, so I want to show you a little video. We really include this in our web-based tool that we give to our student helpers, for example, that also our experts in the study center use, where you can upload a PDF, not running here. And then once the PDF is uploaded, we can run our AI tools to analyze the structure, to generate LaTeX code from mathematical formulas, etc. But then have an expert or a student, a helper, check that it's correct, and if not, make some corrections before it is stored, and then we have an accessible document. Here, for example, you can see that all the mathematical formulas are detected. They get transposed into a LaTeX code. Then to double check, we also transpose it back from the LaTeX to the image, so that the worker can double check whether it's correct. If it's not, it can be corrected, and so on. The same we can do with the reading order. And for the sake of time, I want to go on here now. But I guess you can imagine. And the really cool thing I find is the things we do, the PhD students, master students working on these segmentation models, classification models, LaTeX math conversion models, chart extraction models. All this goes into this production process, and it's a big help to make all of the lecture material accessible. A few words on output devices. As unfortunately, I haven't included a braille line, because typically the tactile output is on a line, on a braille line. So it's just one line of, let's say, 80 braille characters where you can read through the page line by line. But there are also some tactile devices available to display a matrix output, so basically where you can display an image. And as this one here, you see it's the Hyperbraille. I think it costs something like 30,000 euros and is really heavy, like 5 kilograms. I forgot the resolution. I think maybe 600 by 300 or something, really low resolution, but nevertheless, it's a way of dynamically generating tactile output. So we also have some work on how can, if we have the analysis of the document, as we see here on the left on this Washington Post image, how can you browse through it on a tactile output device? So that's also part of the research we are working on. And here you see some more examples that is related to this line extraction. And then you can see, for example, on the left and right image on this tactile output device, how this is plotted on this tactile output device. And then, for example, the semantics that we extract can also be given via audio output. For example, what the x-axis depicts and what the numbers are on the x-axis and the y-axis and so on. And here is also just another example. So what we typically then do, I mean, for the research work, we work on the computer vision part. We also build the interface and build a full system, and then also analyze how well blind users can work with it. That means we typically analyze the system usability, cognitive load, of course, and also the speed in which you can do the conversion. Here's another example that I just very briefly want to show. This is about giving, let me see, audio, tactile and acoustic output via a notebook. So what we have here, you can, on the back of this paper, there's a little QR code that you can scan in, and this depicts a floor plan. And it's a tactile print, so the blind user can move his finger across it and analyze the icons, or maybe even braille. And then if the user double clicks on it, you can give audio output. I hope you can hear it. And by combining tactile information with audio output, you can, of course, show that you can work much more efficiently, because one of the problems of tactile paper and tactile output devices is that it's difficult to get a lot of content on it, because the resolution of tactile output is low, and you cannot bring as much information on it as you could give for a sighted user on a piece of paper. Yeah, it's a one glimpse into this work on making documents accessible. And a second area that we're working on, that's maybe a little bit more on the researchy side and not yet used in production, so to say, but that's nevertheless a very interesting and I think also relevant area where we can support blind users, and that's mobility and orientation. There's a lot of research about that blind users are limited in in autonomous mobility and orientation, especially in areas that they have not been before. And with all the advances and computer vision, especially related to autonomous cars, etc., we think there's a lot that we can do in supporting users. In our lab, we also work on driver assistance system and scene segmentation for cars, etc. And we also work on using the same technology to and make adapted to also support blind users. Here on this image on the right, you see one of our lab members, Gerhard, who is blind, and using one of the very early prototypes in his big backpack to support mobility. And I want to show you a video that is already, I think, 4 or 5 years old. So basically, the user has a heavy laptop in his backpack. He wears glasses with cameras. And we can detect street crossings, walking lights, give, I'll let the video run in a minute, the red light We can give audio output to guide the user across the street. And we can also detect zebra crossings and things like that. Let me just run it for a minute. Of course, the visualization is just for us, the sighted researchers, to see what the system does. And for the blind user, he has bone conducting microphones on his head for the audio output, and we use bone conducting microphones in order to not covering the ears. A similar thing we can do for zebra crossings. I will skip that for the sake of time. Now, this year or last year, the status of our latest generation looks like that. It's now much smaller. We use NVIDIA Nano as a processing platform, so all the processing and the battery packs can be put in a belt around your waist. We have glasses with 3D and RGB camera. And let me just show you some things we do. Semantic segmentation of streets and indoor scenes to support, to make the environment perceivable, and also to give guidance where there is free space and where there are obstacles. Let me show you this video. This is a person walking into our lab, and of course you can see the things that are detected. The challenge here is to make the segmentation models smaller and more efficient. And the second part is, of course, how to design the user interface, give the audio output, and so on. And this is, in fact, it's still a challenge to design that right, and to bring that, I will say, onto the street. So my dream and wish is that we have soon a few prototypes that we can give to blind students at our university, so that they can use it to get from A to B on our campus. That's the goal we are working on here. Some detailed work. There's some work we published on detecting transparent objects such as glass doors. Of course, then we do the usual evaluations, compare the different segmentation models. And as I said, for us, it's also very crucial that it runs in real time. So we work on efficient models, and then also we do user studies to analyze how usable is the system. Here's just an example from some also recent work last year on improving self-localization and mapping in indoor environments to improve navigation support in indoor environments. And this work was about handling moving objects so that we do not corrupt our SLAM when there is a person walking along and things like that. Yeah, and here's an example of a student work. This was using improving the segmentation using RGB plus depth, and also with some audio output to steer the user. And again, the visualization is just for us to see what's going on. This also leads me to the interface. So audio is a one way to go, but also haptic output. And so we're looking into that. For example, how to use sonification to inform the user about specific objects in the environment. Yeah, here are some examples. For example, you can use sonification by representing objects with very similar sounds, like here for stairs, Treppe in German. Let me see. or someone walking up a stair, or here for danger, or here for toilets, bathroom,
I think you might need
elevator.
to share this sound on the.
Okay. I think for the sake of time, I will try do it later if we have time. And
Sure.
then there's a lot of work where we really work with blind users and analyze what are really their needs, what is the information that they would like to have using user studies, questionnaires, and so on. Yeah, I think I rushed through it almost in time, so that gives us some time for questions and discussion. So at you are at CVPR, or we are at CVPR at the workshop. We are all working in computer vision, and at computer vision advances, and these advances in the last years also lead to new possibilities to support blind and seeing impaired users. And our work is currently mainly in making documents more accessible and supporting mobility orientation. We also have a number of projects in supporting older users, which I have not talked about right now. So there are all these advances and opportunities, but there are still a lot of challenges and need for research. So especially if you think about mobility and navigation orientation support, robustness and safety is really needed and a concern. There are things like form factors, runtime, cost in designing the user interface. So it's really not so easy to get this out of the lab. It's different getting a system working and out on the street compared to doing experiments, comparing different models and publishing a paper. And then there are also some ethical and legal issues. Of course, when we do these experiments, we always have to write ethics proposals and have to go out through our ethics panel. But from me as a researcher, of course, more the technical things, and especially also on the HCI, the human-computer interaction part, and the product designs, the system design are really challenges, and these are the things we're working on. For the document analysis, I would say it's much easier, and because it's not an online system where a user goes on the street, but it's more an assistive system to help experts or also the blind users themselves to make documents more accessible. And of course, in our study center, then we have humans in the loop to check what the computer vision or AI modules did and whether it's correct. But this leads to a large speed up for the human workers, of course, as it is now possible in many other areas. So that's really a great thing. With that, I will conclude and thank my co-workers at CVHCI and Service Center Access. And I'm very happy to receive and answer questions.
Great, thank you, Rainer. Thank you for the fantastic talk. So I think we do have a time for a couple of questions. So if somebody wants to write in the chat, or if there's questions in the room here, I'm not sure if that microphone works, but it might. Are there any questions? Yes.
I'll try the microphone.
You can also come here and ask if you.
Here. Let's see. Does this work?
Can you hear Rainer?
Not yet. Can you talk?
Hi, is this any better?
Yeah, it's better. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for the great talk. I was wondering, so for your work on trying to make line plots more, getting that to the tactile world, how have you encountered, say you want to there's a plot with some sort of uncertainty, like maybe Gaussian process regression, what kind of tactile materials would you use to translate that uncertainty, into the physical world? Instead of there's just like the typical line, but then there's that measure.
Okay, so
Well.
not sure if I understood you correctly. So the question is how to deal with uncertainty when giving output on a tactile device, or
Sorry, so like the visualization of uncertainty in a line plot. Say if you're doing like Gaussian process regression or something like that.
yeah, I think we haven't gone so far yet. So with the line plots, we are in an early stage where we can extract the how do you say that, the axis, and we can extract some basic, we can extract the semantics, like what are the units on the axis and so on. But for example, with grayscale, so that what you could display, for example, in a I'm not sure what exactly you mean here, but it's you can display a few levels on a tactile output device, but the resolution is of course very limited. Sometimes we do experiments that we also work with our material sciences department at KIT. They work on new outputs devices, and then sometimes we jointly do experiments on how the surface should be designed and what the resolution is. And so not sure whether this really answers your question, but I guess one answer is we haven't looked into this to great extent yet. So right now there is a PhD student working on a kind of, let's say, an operating system or a first browser that allows you to browse through a page like you have seen, like this Wall Street Journal page, where you have different areas and then you can jump to the next area. And we have first versions to browse these mathematical charts, but there's much to be done.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll switch over, but really, yeah, thanks again, Rainer, for the great talk. And any other questions? Yeah, please reach out via email.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some questions
really,
in the chat.
yeah, really exciting.
Thanks.
There are a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know.
Oh, is there one? Let me see. Oh, yes.
There's 2 questions.
Oh, yes, there's many questions in the chat. Do you have a sense how much acceptance or resistance there will be from bystanders captured by smart glasses worn by blind students in your campus? This is asked by Professor Kokori.
Yeah, we haven't yet looked into it, but we definitely want to do that. And yeah, so I guess that's the answer.
Great.
And about the intersection with robotics, I think there is a there can be an intersection with robotics. In fact, we have now also collaboration with our robotics people, but this is more the first things that came to our mind is supporting people with mobility impairment, not necessarily blind users, but of course, if I have colleagues working on exoskeletons, you can also add cameras to this and perceive the surrounding. At some point, we were thinking about a robotic guide dog, but that's quite technology heavy compared to a wearable system like a camera. So I'm not yet convinced that this is a great idea. And by the way, I would never like to take away the white cane from the blind users, but we want to give them something in addition. Yeah.
Great. I think I definitely have a bunch of questions, but all of your research directions related to things like resolution of information, especially for some of these LaTeX. But I will, yeah, probably email you. I think we should switch over for sake of time, but thank you so much. So let me introduce our next speaker, Jennifer Mankoff. She is the Richard Ladner Professor in the Paul Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington. Her research is focused on accessibility through giving people the voice, tools, and agency to advocate for themselves. She strives to bring both structural and personal perspectives to her work. For example, her recent work in fabrication of accessible technologies considers not only innovative tools that can enable individual makers, but also large clinical and sociological challenges to disseminating and sharing designs. Her work in the intersection of mental health and discrimination uses sense data to explore how external risks and pressures interact with people's responses to challenging moments. She received her PhD from Georgia Tech. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. How does that look?
Looks good.
Great. And hopefully sound will work when we get there. So thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't come in person. I know it's close, but it's also Father's Day. So here I am in Seattle. And what I'm going to talk about today actually builds a lot on what we just heard about, but I'm trying to look sort of at the data pipeline and sort of the experience of data scientists with disabilities. And again, similar to the previous speaker, focusing on people who are blind and low vision. And I want to just start though by saying that I am part of the CREATE Center at the University of Washington, as is Richard. I'm a co-director of it. And CREATE has a really broad set of things that we work on, including early childhood access, race, disability, and technology, physical computing, transportation systems, and more. And if you're interested, you can go to create.uw.edu to find out more about it. So I just wanted to share that I'm also here in a sense representing CREATE and happy to answer questions about it. And I'll try to stick around after the talks a little bit. So the question that I wanted to bring to this talk, because I know that if you're doing computer vision, you're using data, is to sort of ask us to think about who uses data and what do they use it for. And you might think about scientists or everyday people as two categories of people who use data. So COVID dashboards, for example, were a really important data visualization and interaction tool that many people have been using over the last few years. And many other people also use data, both as consumers, but also as producers of data, so collecting it, for example, and as data scientists who are trying to operate on and work with data. And the research I'm going to talk about today takes the position that any of these people might have disabilities, might be blind or low vision, and we should think about what it might mean to increase their experience, the accessibility of their experience with data. So I'm going to sort of lay out a possible thought process about what a data pipeline might look like. And just as an illustration, let's take this physical computing exercise where somebody is exploring how a light sensitivity sensor works. Maybe they're building something that they want to put out in the world that will react when it's light or dark. And you can see in this case, as they're bringing the phone closer to this microbit and therefore adding the amount of light that's present, they have chosen to visualize this right on the microbit and with audio in order to indicate that what's going on in ways that are accessible to multiple kinds of disabilities. So in this piece of the pipeline, we might think about asking who is collecting data and are the tools that are being used for this accessible when it comes to debugging, to understanding how sensors are working, and so on and so forth. But of course, that's just the first step. By the way, did the audio come through there? Just checking.
No, it didn't. Yeah, I didn't realize it was audio.
So
Lisa says that it has.
It did come through?
We couldn't hear it. Do you want to try again to see if it plays?
let me see if I can change the try now.
Yes.
Great. Okay, good to fix that. So the next
You can
thing,
hear it a little bit, right?
what's that? Just a little bit?
No, I think we're good now. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yep. So the next step of the data pipeline, and I'm going to spend more time on this and the final step, might be thought of as exploring data. So this could include cleaning data, and also maybe early stage visualizations and other things that we often do, for example, in Jupyter notebooks or other tools that are meant for exploratory data analysis. And so here we might ask, are the popular tools used today accessible to people who are blind and low vision or have other disabilities? And then finally, we might think about using data. So at some point, we're going to perhaps move past the exploratory stage to providing interfaces to people who might just want to access the data. And so they might want to understand a visualization or modify it or interact with it, or possibly look at a report, or maybe they're interacting with a machine learning system. And so we might think about what is their experience, how much interactivity is supported, how much is it equal to other people who might use the same data who are not disabled. So we'll start with the middle one, exploring data, for a second. And what I'm going to talk about here is one primary study, which is looking at how Jupyter notebooks in particular meet accessibility needs and how accessible they are across a large data set of notebooks. And this is an in-submission piece of work by Venkatesh Patluri, who is my PhD student, and two other students, Siddhish Singha Namala and Nusra Tinklin. And it's in submission to Assets right now. So I'm giving you an early peek at something that I'm just really excited about. So what we did was we started with the JetBrains collection of 10 million notebooks, and we actually narrowed it down to 100,000 after starting with 10,000 and seeing that our results weren't changing as we went up. And then we also did a validity check on them and looked at ones that specifically had Python in them for a subset of our analysis, of which there were about 92,000. And the first question we just ask is, are notebooks accessible? And the answer is, well, it depends partly on the IDE you're using. So web IDEs for notebook editing are not very accessible to screen reader users, but VS Code, for example, which is already very accessible in general for screen reader users, also has a notebook interface, and that works okay. There's a third thing that happens with notebooks, which is that they are often rendered in HTML and put on the web. And so we wanted to explore that in our first step of our analysis. And what we did here actually was a manual exploration. So we looked at 10 notebooks across a range of sizes. And in this presentation, just to fit on the slide, I randomly selected about 5 of them to show you. And we tried them in 3 different browsers with 3 different screen readers. And we in all of what I'm presenting, we are presenting what I'm calling optimistic estimates. I'll talk about that more right now. But here, basically, we just looked at, could you reach the structural and graphical elements in a notebook? So as you can see, VoiceOver was consistently able to reach the headers and also the images and tables in notebooks. So the main structural elements that are present in them, and to move between cells as they were presented in HTML. But it doesn't have as large a market share as some of these other screen readers, especially for people who are programmers, or data scientists. We also saw that a majority of the 10 that we looked at were not accessible to NVDA or JAWS. And one of the particular bugs that we saw over and over again was that you could only detect the first graphic of all programmatically generated graphics. And as notebooks got larger, the screen readers actually crashed, or the browsers did. So definitely not accessible just at a very base level on average. We also wanted to know how specific authoring practices impacted this, because what you're seeing here is really just a high level of, does the HTML rendering have basic accessibility? And so here we looked at header use. So the best practice is not to have headers out of order or use headers for formatting instead of logical reasons. We looked at alt text, and we looked at whether tabular alternatives to images of visualizations were available. And this is where we're starting to get into what I'm calling optimistic estimates, which are likely to have high sensitivity, meaning that all accessible notebooks are correctly labeled as accessible, but low recall, meaning many accessible notebooks may be incorrectly labeled as accessible. And these optimistic estimates are useful because they're much easier to calculate automatically. And since we're looking at 100,000 notebooks, we're just not going to be able to manually check our estimates. And they give us a sense of the best that you can expect. So obviously we want to do better than that, but it's a start to understanding how prevalent accessibility issues are. So let's look at header use. So what we looked at here was the cell position and type of the first heading element. So the cell position is shown on the y-axis and the type is shown on the x-axis here. And so, for example, in this situation where H1 is the first header seen, that's ideal because that means it's coming before other header types, right? And so we're going to call all of the things all the way down to, we looked at 10 cells, accessible. And so that's a little bit less than 35% of notebooks. And then all of the other headers coming first means they're being used for formatting rather than other things, so less accessible. We also looked at the presence of alt text in these notebooks, and it is less than 2% of images, close to 1%. It is possible to put alt text in Markdown using this description tag. Obviously, many images are auto-generated, so this is a little bit of an unfair estimate. But when we looked at the alt text content, we can see that even where alt text is present, it's not something that, generally speaking, is being used to make images more accessible. So another image access metric that's more appropriate for programmatically generated images is to look at whether an image is immediately followed by Markdown, maybe that would be explanatory, or a table that somebody with a screen reader could use to explore the same data that is in the image. Again, this is an optimistic estimate. And we saw that about 70% of cells are followed by a table or Markdown, 2% by a table and Markdown. So very, very optimistic estimate. These are places where possibly accessibility is present. When we looked at table accessibility, however, we saw that the tables themselves were generally not accessible. So most of the tables, about half of the tables had less than 10 rows because the defaults in Jupyter Notebook are to show a summary of a data table that only has 10 rows because that's visually accessible to anyone more than, having many rows in a notebook context, but only 20% have less than 10 columns because the defaults tend to include all of the columns. So here again, we are not seeing, I'm going to call this less than 20% of the 70% of automatically generated images that have table or Markdown on them are actually accessible, but we can't be sure of that, of course. So that's just a really brief summary of what we've been looking at the large scale with Jupyter Notebooks, but we might also dig in deeper to visualization accessibility in a more ideal case where these visualizations are not just designed for people exploring their own data, but meant to be put out in public more commonly. And so there's obviously a lot of research on visualization accessibility and really an exponential increase in how much attention is going into this in recent years. I will say most of the published work we've been able to find is looking at the accessibility of individual charts. And in the recent years, like the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen some big advances in this in terms of looking at going beyond just or going beyond standard approaches of sonification and tactile graphics to improve our understanding of how we should verbally describe things, to add keyboard-based exploration and hierarchical exploration, and some of these products are widely available, like HighCharts, and then to start adding interactivity. So this is not my work, but I just wanted to feature it because it's supporting with a standard visualization built in D3 or other common popular platforms. The authors were able to look at the web JavaScript defining that visualization and automatically add support for interactive querying, such as what's the maximum data point in a graph, or what about the average and variance? And the system can look at the data and the chart specification and answer things like, I understand you're looking for a maximum value of total crime for crime neighborhood is 48,900 belonging to downtown commercial. Or I heard you asking about the average and variance. Average of total crime for crime neighborhood is 8,870. Variance of total crime for neighborhood is 78,800,000. So that's a big improvement, but there's more to be done. I mentioned COVID dashboards earlier, and much of the work that we've been discussing doesn't necessarily look at how we can make groups of interactive visualizations accessible. And I'm highlighting both the fact that there's multiple and that they are interactive. So another in submission paper, which I'm not going to say as much about, but we're looking at how do you describe dashboards, including their layout, all of the components on them and how they interrelate, and how do you describe changes caused by user interaction. And this is with Arjun Srinivasan at Tableau. And so just as an example of some of the text we can generate, after somebody interacts with a chart and narrows down on a specific field or changes the focus, the system that we built would say, for example, 8 blocks, meaning 8 separate areas of this visualization were updated. Key changes for the current selection of college type public compared to the previous selection of college type private. So this is a visualization of college information include. And then it has a whole series of different facts that it extracts from the different charts. For example, average tuition cost reduced by 21,105 from 29,548 to 8,443. Or highest degree, master's, replaced baccalaureate as the category with the highest value, accounting for 49% of the total count. So this is just beginning to look at how can we notify people not only about what is in visualizations, but how they change when you interact with them in the context of a complex dashboard. Now, another thing that I think can be used to give people control over their visualizations is generative design. And so we might think about letting users specify their information priorities and preferred representations, and then automatically generating a visualization that meets their specific needs. And what we've been doing in our work is using optimization to generate tactile representations based on these kinds of specifications. So that in this case, a user can more successfully and efficiently identify locations of interest in unknown areas. But this same kind of generative design approach could be used in multiple contexts. So this was work by Megan Hoffman, Kelly Mack, and Jerry Cow and others called Maptimizer at Chi 22. And the images I'm showing here on the top are a 3D printed map, part of the University of Washington campus with raised lines and regions that have different textures based on those preferences specified by the user and decided specifically by our optimization process. And then below that, you see a map of the same part of the University of Washington campus. But in this case, we have generated it using an embroidery machine. And so textures and lines, stitch types have been chosen by the optimization algorithm based on user preferences in this case. So a third type of way that we might support interactivity is illustrated by the project PSST, which was led by Venkatesh Patluri, and I'm going to let him describe for himself. This was a WIST 2022, I think, publication. So he's going to explain what we're doing in this quick video. Please let me know if there's any trouble hearing it. And I might pause now and again to just describe what's on the scene, but I'm hoping he's going to describe some of it too, so we'll see.
We built the PSST dashboard, an interactive, accessible graphical user interface that lets users customize data handlers and outputs. Let us now look at how a user would use PSST to.
So in this example, Venkatesh is holding another sensor over a bottle filled with hot water.
We built the PSST dashboard, an interactive, accessible graphical
backwards.
a user would use PSST to understand how temperature and humidity sensors respond when placed at the mouth of a water bottle with hot water in it. First, let's add a note handler to the temperature sensor and configure its note output to play audio from the user's left speaker.
Note handler 1 of 5. List of 13 sensors. Note handler. Clickable stereo pan stereo pan stereo left.
Now, let's add a second note handler to the humidity sensor and configure its output to play audio from the right speaker.
Humidity Z99 heading level 4. 36.1 menu button submenu at blank. Filter range handlers fixed. Filter note handler 1 of list of 13 sensors. Clickable combo box selects both. Combo box both left, right.
Now, let's also find the maximum temperature reading as we get this sensor closer to the water bottle. To do this, let's configure an extrema handler to report new maxima with a speech output.
Humidity Z19 temperature Z99 heading add handler menu blank. Filter range handler extrema handler 3 of 5. No next combo box. Menu item slope menu item extrema handler X. List of 13 sensor services connect clickable combo box selects maximum and minimum. Combo box maximum only, minimum only, maximum only.
We will now press the play button to start playback and bring the sensor closer to the water bottle. Note that the values you will now hear are from the speech output of PSST.
24.8945 26.33398435 28.27441440
So that was Venkatesh using his screen reader to interact with our accessible interface and setting up the specific features of the sensor data that he was interested in hearing in order to understand what was going on as the sensor went into this high humidity, high heat environment. And so he chose to have it speak out values that were extrema and then play sonification for the whole value stream. And when we did conducted a user study with BLV participants using this, we got comments like, I've seen these sonifications for decades, but I've never seen anything nice in a dashboard like this that lets you add and remove multiple ones and tweak the parameters of each. So what we're trying to do, well, I guess I'll pause here just for a second and see if there's any questions about this part of the talk, which is about sort of control over visualization design. I see 2 chat questions. I just wanted to check. Okay. And then the next thing I want to talk about is tools that really intend people with disabilities to be in the data science author sheet. And so how do we enable BLV creators and support not just visualization access, but engaging directly with data? So PSST is trying to do that. And even programmatically creating visualization. So I'm just going to go under the hood of PSST just a little bit. And what you're seeing here is a picture of that same sensor that we just heard this example with, but now I'm showing the underlying objects that are used in PSST to support this. So on the left here, we have an output engine and a light sensor. And the output engine just helps control everything. The light sensor is sending readings to a data sync. And all of this is implemented in TypeScript using our XGS as streaming data library underneath. When the data sync gets this, it extracts the most interesting thing and it sends it to a note handler. And this is all things that you can specify in code or in that interface we saw. And then the note becomes a representation of the thing that was extracted, which is brightness, and that is sent to a note output object. And you can, all of these are pluggable. You can choose which one you send. In addition, you can combine and mix and match them. So in reality, what was going on in that interface is that we were setting up links between a temperature and a humidity center, and both the temperature and the humidity reading were going to different data syncs. And then the values of the humidity sensor and the temperature sensor were both going to note handlers that would play sonification. But in addition, the temperature value also went to what's called an extrema handler, which extracts the maximum temperature seen so far and then plays that verbally out as speech. And the architecture of PSST is designed to support a variety of different kinds of outputs, handlers, and ways of processing data, and all of this accessible to a blind and low vision person because it's code and they can do it right in VSS code and pluggable and easy to interact with. So this includes sonification, speech, pre-recorded ear cons, but also anything else you can imagine. And so here's an example where we used laser cutting to actually cut holes in a strip of paper that also fits a music box. So it's both tactile because you can move your finger along it and feel where the holes are, but here's Venkatesh running it through the music box. He can move that so fast. He spins it so fast, it's going quite quickly through it. Okay, so I suppose I'm probably ending a little early too, but I just want to conclude by saying that sort of the overall theme of what I'm trying to say here is that we really want to look at how we can support on-demand access to information, even when somebody didn't already decide it needs to be accessible. Participation in live data exploration and inclusion in employment opportunities and learnings associated with careers that deal with information, for example, like data science. And this approach is pretty consistent across my group, not only to data science, but for example, my group does a lot of work with knitting. So you might ask who can knit or use knitting machines. We've done studies of who knits, including disabled knitters, right? You might ask about how we can use optimization and generative design to let people design knit patterns, even if they perhaps are disabled in some way that affects their ability to use the standard tools and give them easy ways to specify their preferences, but also how we can make the overall process more accessible. Similarly, we've done a lot of work in medical making, and so we might ask, how do we design objects that meet clinical needs, who can design them? How can we ensure that domain experts with or without disabilities can engage in design, even if they're not computer scientists, and so on and so forth. And so we've done work, for example, on optimization toolkit for generating generative design interfaces more easily. And a third project I'll just mention briefly is looking at VR, AR, and specifically EMG-based sensing of gestures that are made with the upper body by doing upper body motions. And here the question that relates to end user control is who is designing gesture sets for these interfaces? It turns out that when we did a study with almost 30 people with upper body motor impairments of a variety of types, that the gestures that they want to create don't look at all like the standard gesture sets that are included in these kinds of interfaces. So we did have some high agreement with gestures that are pretty common for zooming and swiping and other things like that across multiple participants, and also seeing gestures that were not dissimilar from what is supported in standard gesture sets. But if you, we also saw a lot of really unique gestures. So I'm just going to describe a couple: flexing fingers from right to left, squeezing the hand into a fist, rotating shoulders, looking up and down, shrugging shoulders, flexing shoulders in and out, and tapping the chin twice, based on what kinds of motor movements were available to the individual doing these gestures. And if we don't design these kinds of interfaces in a way that lets people design or specify their own gesture set at the time of use, we're going to exclude a subset of people. So again, we want to give people creative control over how they interact with these systems. So I'll just leave you with a final question, which is whatever project you're working on, are the interfaces you build accessible? How much power do they give to end users with disabilities who might want to customize or modify the details of how you're doing things? And are the tools that you use accessible enough that people with disabilities could also be doing the same work you're doing to define these systems? I will stop there. Oops, that's an extra slide. You don't need that. And I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Jennifer, for super interesting talk. Any questions, please feel free to put in the chat. Is there any questions in the room? Maybe we can go first with the anybody who's here. Any questions? Go ahead. We have time for some questions since I'm presenting the challenge next. So yeah, so just feel free to step to the laptop and ask.
Okay, this is very
We have a couple of questions here.
In the demo with the sonification, it was really sped up, and I'm assuming that was on purpose, right?
You mean the interface?
Yes.
That was, I think, a slightly slowed down compared to how Venkatesh usually uses his screen reader. So you weren't intended to understand every word that the screen reader was saying, but he was trying to illustrate some of the, I think he stopped to describe a couple of the specific things he was doing with the screen reader. So yeah, you weren't expected to understand everything the screen reader was saying, but that, you know, is how his system works and hopefully supports accessibility for any BLV audience members who do use screen readers.
So it does enunciate it very fast just because, and you get used to kind of how it's supposed to sound. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
I guess the question was about the speed, and like each user probably has a preferred speed, and it can get pretty fast for some users.
Yeah, I imagine what you get used to is.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a
do you
question
wanna-
in the chat. I would love to hear your thoughts on access to image data. How can we make the data collection accessible for blind people? This might be especially of interest as many assistive technologies for the blind community do rely on computer vision. We tried to work a bit on this for object classification when the user was the one collecting the data, but it quickly becomes difficult making a cognitive demand of the user. And this is from Hernissa Kakori. Thank you for that question. And I think it's a really interesting question. In terms of, you know, when you're thinking about making sort of the tools of production, so the tools where you're working with this data accessible, but also if you're automating these things, you want to make sure that there's some transparency about what algorithms are doing and how people can understand whether they are successfully meeting their needs, because we know that computer vision, as with many other machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies, is not 100% perfect. And if you don't have transparency, it's hard to debug that. So So I agree with you. That's a really important problem. And I do agree that it can be overwhelming to give all of those details all the time. And I don't unfortunately have a clear answer about what the right solution is. But I'd love to talk more about it because I think that, you know, we need to explore how to do that and do it better. Great point.
Thank you. There's one more question here.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Hi. So I actually have two questions. My first question is, I read recently somewhere that kind of the amount of visualizations, you mentioned a little bit interactive ones, but I just heard that the quantity of them is growing and it's, you know, it's going to be everywhere. It's already inside of cars. I guess, how do we keep up with making kind of these novel and new types of visualizations accessible? So that's the first one. And the second one is, like, we're in the CVPR conference. I'm sure there's a lot of people here who are taking computer visualization classes. I took one. It was not accessible by default. We actually didn't even learn anything about accessibility in the class. What would you recommend for people in kind of computer vision academia? How do you make that accessible? Thank you.
Those are great questions. And I bet Richard's talk will touch on things that might be relevant to them when he talks a little later this afternoon. I guess I would say that, you know, that the project that I showed off that wasn't mine a few slides ago, specifically back, sorry, I didn't realize how far back I had to go. Nope, I missed it. Okay, I'm just going to keep talking. The project that is trying to improve, like, question answering, this one, VoxLens, about visualizations, is a great example of something that a developer can literally add one line of code to their use of existing top of the line visualization libraries. And all of this accessibility stuff comes for free, because at the time when you're specifying the visualization, a lot of information is available that might not be available if you just have the pixel version of it. And there's been some other interesting work similarly looking at, like, PDF visualizations where you can extract a lot more information than you might be able to do from PNG ones. So there is, I think, a lot of attention, and there needs to be in the community, to how can we add accessibility into the standard practices that people are doing. You know, of course, we also have to make sure people add that line of code. And that means we have to educate people about accessibility in classes on visualization. And, you know, we want to also make sure that any student in those classes can participate in them equitably. And there's a lot of work to do there still. I know that Richard is working on a textbook about how we can include accessibility in a variety of different topics of computer science. I think he's involved in that. Amy Coe's involved in it, and some other folks at UW. And so there's a lot to do there. And I think that we can do a lot more than we are, but it's a good thing to be thinking about. I know we're a little over. I didn't realize I had gone so long. So I don't know if there's time for more questions or not, but are you, sorry, go on.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we can do one final question.
Okay. So this is a question about, are you planning on incorporating any large language models into your work? Great question. Actually, the answer is yes, but not currently directly into the visualization work. Our team of students and I are working right now on exploring how large language models impact accessibility in the products they produce. So when you use a large language model to produce a visualization or a web page, is that accessible? And how can you change the prompt to improve that? Similarly, we're looking at ableism in those models. So if you ask it to create an image that has people in it, is disability represented? If you ask for disability to be included, does it know how to do that? Same with text, how does it represent disability? And then finally, can large language models solve visualization, solve accessibility problems for people with disabilities? And you'll see Kate, who's my incoming student who just asked the previous two questions, presenting a poster on that today. So I encourage you to visit her poster.
Great, thank you so much. And we'll switch over. Thanks again for the fantastic talk. Thank you.
Thanks for including me.
Oh, do not want to click end. And now I'll share my screen here. Just a second. So next we have the challenge results. Great. And okay, it's coming over here in just a sec. Okay, 1 minute. So we revamped our challenge for this year and received really nice feedback. For some reason, it's not, Zoom is being weird. Zoom people, can you hear me?
Yes.
The app seems to be stuck. Maybe this is. Yeah, this is weird. Let me try to rejoin. I think we got it this time. Let's see. Great. Okay, and we're back. Thanks for your patience. All right, so we had this pretty exciting and close challenge. So actually, a lot of the reason why we started this workshop is because we realized that there were so many workshops related to things like autonomous driving, but then a lot of them did not include data points that are oriented towards accessibility classes. So we created this challenge, a segmentation and a key point challenge. And it's more of an exploratory question. Can a computer vision detect canes or not? Because we realized they were not in any of the data sets. So we didn't even know. Maybe the performance were 100%, maybe they were 0. But we had a feeling that this is a challenging problem. So if you look at what at how a cane looks, for instance, it is quite it can merge with the background. It's a long item that is not common in standard computer vision data sets. And there's actually been a few instances recently where robots and individuals with disabilities did not interact seamlessly. So there was this case of Toyota very recently, about 1.5 years ago in the Paralympic Games. They had to shut down their autonomous driving fleet because it collided with one of the athletes who was visually impaired. There was another case of a sidewalk delivery robot shown here on the right that would stop at the curb cut of the intersections and consequently blocking wheelchaired individuals from going safely from traffic and onto the sidewalk. And we looked and we saw that there was no good data sets for this. So even though there's lots of data sets for pedestrians, they do not have mobility aids with them. At the same time, if we wanted to collect something like this, you need IRB approval, and this can be cumbersome to annotate. So we designed this simulation based on another simulation called Carla, and we incorporated these pedestrians. And this was a very this enables us to collect lots and lots of data for canes and various pedestrians, various weathers, various towns, various mobility aid designs. So we just kind of incorporated a very diverse set of assets, spawn them in the environment, and then let your car drive with multiple cameras or pedestrians walk with cameras on them, and capture the various perspectives of pedestrians. And this resulted in a pretty difficult data set. So you can see how a lot of the instances in our data, this is from last year, so we had over 100,000 images, and a lot of the images contained large number of categories, as well as large number of instances, 15, 20, 25. So last year, we ran this challenge for the first time, and we had 9 teams participating. And we noticed how the AP, or the accuracy for person, is generally higher than for person in a wheelchair, for instance, potentially due to the occlusion of the mobility aid. It's slightly lower for a visually impaired, so a person with a cane. But what the most difficult class that came out of this was the cane itself, which was at about 8 or 9% AP. And then wheelchair is also pretty low. And this is a real world problem as well, even though this isn't simulation. So this is last year. Amazingly, this year we almost, so we had 16 teams participate, and we also added another challenge, which was key point detection. And I'll show you that this is actually a complementary challenge to the segmentation task. So we had 16 teams participate. We expanded the data to even make it larger. So there was about a total of nearly 500,000 images captured in highly diverse settings. Over 100,000 instances of cane. So this means that if you're pushing the performance by 1%, you're actually significantly increasing the performance of your algorithm, because this is such a large data set. So here are some examples from the simulated data set, the same categories that we had before, but now we also added a key point, 65 key point detection. Instead of segmentation, this is very easy to do because this is simulated, so we can just immediately get these annotations, which is nice. And you can see how this reflections from puddles on the floor. So these are the results. We had an evaluation server and 16 teams participate, including our baseline, so that makes 17 total. And a lot of the patterns are very similar, but interestingly, we find that actually the difference among the person categories is now shrinking. So if you look at the top performance, as so you can have an algorithm that actually does very good at detecting upright pedestrians without any mobility aids, but does very poorly on the other categories. Same time, the top team seem to have kind of found a solution that works well, so that the performance trade-off is not significant. And then we can see how actually the performance are very consistent with last year, but we came a long way. So now we're at about 15% for the cane class, which is quite remarkable. We still have a long way to go. And congrats to the team. So the first team, which we'll talk about their solution, is HSS Lab Inspur. The second team is by Deep Blue AI. And then the third team is Key Laboratory for Intelligent Perception and Image Understanding of Ministry of Education. So congratulations. This is the key point results. This was a separate challenge because we figured, even though a lot of the algorithms solve both, maybe less. So we didn't know. We didn't know yet, so we figured it's a new challenge. We figured we'll separate them. This is also kind of an interesting result. So if you look at the key point detection here, you can actually see a much more significant drop from a person to a person with a wheelchair, a person with a cane. And those two categories now have, so introduced new types of poses and additional pose diversity, which is really shown on the evaluation side here. And these are the top 3 teams. So we had the STAR team is number 1, the ICOS team is number 2, and then the third Epic Gamer from Deep Blue AI team, and some of these overlap with the previous one. And with that, I just want us to kind of so congratulations for the winners. So the first place is the first place awards was $500. So it's not a lot, but it is a for a worthy cause. And then the second place is for a Intel camera. So we definitely want to thank DOT, NSF, and Intel for kind of donating some of these or funding some of these. And if the winner of the segmentation challenge is here, they can share the screen and give us an overview of their solution. Team HSS Lab, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Could you hear me?
Yes. Do you want to share your screen?
Oh, yes.
Great, congrats.
Oh, thanks a lot.
And if I could just ask the other teams who are ready to present to just be ready with their slides, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes. Anyone can hear this, can see the screen?
Looks good.
Oh, let's begin. Hello, everyone. It's our pleasure to share our solutions in the AVA X-Word Instance Segmentation Challenge this year. Firstly, I would like to introduce our team members. From left to right, our team members are Rengang Li, Yaqian Zhao, Zhenhua Guo, Bao Yufan, Renze Zhang, and Xiaochan Li. And we are all from Innsbruck company. I will introduce our work from the following aspects. Instance segmentation is a significant research area in the field of computer area. Also, the high quality annotations are necessary for the area. There is a general lack of relevant benchmarks or methods for such people with disabilities and mobility aids. Thanks for the AVA workshop for providing an opportunity for fostering a manual discussion between accessibility, computer vision, and robotics researchers. From the left image, we could see the synthetic dataset provides high quality instance segmentation map, both normal person and person with disabilities. And in the right image, we could see the more fine-grained categories of realization. We could see that the synthetic dataset contains abundant annotations, including different vehicles and all kinds of the pedestrians. Even the cane and the wheelchair annotation are annotated with high quality. The dataset mainly presents the following two challenges. Firstly, is a gap between the synthetic data and the real-world data. And secondly, the long-tailed and few sample issues. We could see the categories such as cane and wheelchairs actually contain few samples in the training dataset. And next, we will introduce our pipeline. We implied the cascade mask assembly network to solve the instance segmentation task. During the training stages, we employed a cascaded training strategy. Firstly, we should make sure the model owns the base capability for real-world scenes. So we first pre-trained the cascade mask assembly on the COCO and the open image datasets. And secondly, we fine-tuned the AVA X-Word categories loading the pre-trained weights on the first phase. In this phase, we employed the copy-paste data augmentation to solve the long-tailed distribution issues. And finally, to better boost the tailored category like cane and wheelchair, we fine-tuned such categories, loading the second phase model weights. During the final phase, we found that different categories should have different confidence scores. Therefore, we finally obtained the predicted results from the second stage, which we called global results, and the predicted results from the third stage we called partial results, and we summed all the results with the pixelwise NMS algorithm. And this part, we will talk about the backbone selection. And in fact, we spent lots of time on the backbone selection. We collected 5 top performance backbones with different network in recent years. They are the ResNest, EfficientNet, ConneXt, Swing Transformer, and the Inter-Image series. For each item, we adopted the highest performance configuration on the ImageNet benchmark. We did the experiments with mask RNN. The experiments demonstrated that the Inter-Image is the best framework for this task. Finally, we combined the Inter-Image huge network twice using the CVNet's version 2-star paper. And we obtained a 64.3% MAP on the validation sets. And this part, we showed the threshold experiments. Actually, it's simple in practice, but really useful in this task. We found such interesting phenomenon that the long category in the long-tailed distribution should have higher confidence score. For the non-disabled pattern with 0.5, while the tailed category should have lower confidence. For the cane category, we set 0.38. And from the experiments, we could see that the cane category boosted from 9.4 to 14.5. It is indeed a significant improvement. The experiment details are on the left. We employed the copy paste and horizontal flipped augmentation. And the training image size is the same as the original image size. And the training approach is 12. The optimizer is a DAM, and the initial learning rate is 1/10,000. The segmentation loss rate is 2.0. And the right table showed our final results on the test phase. After the second training phase, we obtained global prediction with 65.16% MAP. After the final training phase, we obtained partial results with 67.45% MAP. We assembled the global and partial results with the pixel-wise NMS algorithm. The final performance is 79% MAP. And this is all about our work. Thanks a lot.
Great, thanks. And then I think we have the next, is it the second place or the third place? I think we have someone from the Key Point Challenge, yes? And while we switch, are there any questions for the top submission for the segmentation? So do you feel like the main reason why the cane category went up so much is because of the cascaded architecture that helps with the localization? Or the ensemble model, like what? Or was it the backbone? Which one? Or just all of them essentially?
I think the main The main reason are from the following two aspects. The first is the backbone section, and the second is the thresholds. The cone category should have a lower confidence score. It is really useful in the task.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So the next team here. We're still here despite of any time zone differences. Going once.
I don't think they're here. I think maybe it's too late in China. I contact them, but none of them respond.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Jonkai. All right, sounds good. Do we have anybody from the Key Point Challenge? I think anyways, we're running a bit short on time, so we can switch over for the poster highlights. Let me show the order. Actually, the order is on our website. So I think the first poster is a data set of human actions for abnormal event recognition in assistive robotic environments. Are you here?
Yes, hello everyone.
Hi,
You hear me?
Nassim?
Yes.
Hi, great. Yes.
Thank you.
Do you want to
Hello
talk a
from
little?
Lille.
Do you want to start us off?
Can I share my screen?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's a better place to present this new data set. It's a data set about human actions in the context of assistive robotics. Our project is in the context of ambient assisted living. We are working with a startup that create a robot for helping people to make to be more autonomous in the context for vulnerable people, vulnerable by age, by disability, by illness. And the idea is to create a robot that understands and monitor actions in the context of daily activity monitoring or rehabilitation after some kind of illness or abnormal event detection. And what we discovered by analyzing the state of the art of the approaches and the data sets is that there is not a lot of data to work on this problem for accessibility and autonomy in general. Current human action recognition data set do not cover some special events, or when there are some events, they are always in relation with some specific event like falling or like some very unique events. There is a big lack of data sets for static situations like lying on the floor, and also for indoor data sets, always the camera are fixed. So what we did in our data set is to try to deal with all these kind of situations and to propose a new data set that try to cover this lack of data. And this new data set is composed, was recorded on a demonstrator, a real apartment in which we tried with 20 actors to record more than 2,000 videos covering 10 actions. In these actions, we have some kind of normal and abnormal situations. And also for the abnormal situation, there are some normal actions that are similar to them. Like, for example, when you talk about falling, we recorded some events in which the people are just bending down to get some objects. And also, for example, we have some static events like lying on the floor and some similar event to them like lying on bed. So I will share some videos, some video examples if you want during the poster session. And what Catherine did is to currently compare all the state-of-the-art approaches in which we used some kind of input data such as skeleton or optical flow techniques, and to prove that those techniques are not adapted for some situations like lying on the floor or like for static events or simply for moving robots. So what we did is to propose a new approach based on a mix of human body segmentation and scene segmentation to deal with this kind of situations. And we will discuss about the results during the questions. Okay, so thank you, and we are waiting for your questions and feedback.
Great. Any quick questions? There's a couple questions here. So I think because this is kind of like this hybrid virtual in person, I was thinking maybe we do this like since we have about 6 or 7 posters, we could just ask some questions as we go through it. And then there's a longer coffee break, so we could you know, people could take a break. And then maybe the second poster session at the end of the workshop could be physical. We can all go down and discuss. So yeah, so there's a couple of questions here. So go ahead.
I'll just tell you and then you echo it in the microphone.
Or directly if you like. So
You know, if you want to say it's no problem at all. Yeah, thanks for the talk. Is the data set actual people in assisted living, or are they simulated actors?
Yeah, they are simulated. They are simulated.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because currently recording this kind of abnormal event is very hard. And so the only solution today is to work with some kind of simulated data with real actors, or to create some generative data with this with the new techniques, which we are wanting to do in the next months.
Great, thank you. There is one more question here.
Hi, so I work with egocentric data in general, large-scale egocentric data, and I was like realizing that, you know, we make lots of assumptions like access to hands, right? Because, you know, if you understand what hands are doing, then you generally understand what the actions being performed are. But in these scenarios, you know, the hands may not be visible, and they may not even be operable. So are there any other kinds of assumptions you think could be introduced that like are good cues for understanding whether things are abnormal, like things that are easier to understand from video? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so what we did is to record some scenes in which the view is partial. So for example, some details about the body are missing, and I can show you some examples later with the, so I have here, all the videos are ready to be shown. So the idea is sometimes you have to deal with some kind of partial data in which the body is not, we cannot see the whole body. So what we do here is to just to see what kind of information could semantic segmentation bring to us, instead of the impossibility to build some kind of skeleton based on some partial view. And the idea also is to deal with this kind of sometimes of very static situation with mobile robots, in which in some frames the view is partial, and after that this view could be corrected by the robot to see the whole body. So this is our idea in this data set.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if it answers a little of this question, but
I guess like changing the view in simulation.
Mhm.
That might be nice to generate from multiple views at the same time.
yeah, in the some kind of ground truth information. So we didn't. Maybe it will be in the next version to have this two-stream video, one from the robot and one from the global view to mix them. But currently the problem is that in the real context, the robot, the only view we have is this robot view, and we are trying to deal with this unique source of information.
Great, thank you so much for joining us at midnight your time.
Yeah.
And sharing this interesting data set. Great, I think the next poster or abstract is textual and directional sign recognition. Masaki, do you want to talk a little bit, or how do you want to do it? Because he's here. Great, I will mute this then, yes? Or you want to talk through?
Sure, yeah, I'll just talk through. Hi, everyone. My name is Masaki from Waseda University in Japan, and today I'm going to be talking about textual and directional sign recognition for blind people. So this work was built on top of Kai paper I just published a month ago, and so I work on the navigation system for blind people. And the problem about the navigation system is that these systems require pre-built mapped environment, which is commonly not available in every buildings, which means that the users cannot have access to these kind of systems everywhere. So the problem here is that we want to have a navigation system that navigates them without a pre-built map of the system, which means system has to detect the like environmental features in real time, and then navigate blind users based on the information. So we kind of conducted a participatory study with blind people to first determine what information should the system detect to navigate blind people in unfamiliar buildings. And based on the investigation, we identified that blind people need intersections and information regarding intersections and directional signs, which consists of arrows and words, and textual signs, which is kind of namespaces or like this kind of signs without arrows are important when navigating unfamiliar buildings. So based on that, we kind of developed a navigation system that navigates blind people by conveying this kind of information. But please, if you want to know more about this, please read my Kai paper. So in this poster, since it's CVPR, we've kind of elaborate more on sign detection recognition we built for this system. And so what this thing does is, sorry, the resolution is not very good in this screen sharing, but so it detects words and text and arrows from an image, and then links kind of determine the correspondence between text and arrows. Like, so if the sign is left to the cafeteria and right to the something hall, you have to kind of analyze that this cafeteria links to the arrow left and this hall leads to the arrow right. So we do those kind of analysis to detect the arrows in what was it, text, and then read out the information correctly for blind users so that they can determine their way. So I'm gonna talk about the method on the poster session, but we did a comparison with the baseline method and revealed that our system does outperform the baseline method. But at the same time, there's a lot of recognition miss where we achieved only 50% of the correct of the sign reading performance.
They want you to make it full screen.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, let's see here.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, better, yeah. So yes, that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Might be in the chat. So do you find that the robustness of the segmentation algorithm is good enough for you to detect the text and the sign, or is it like very noisy and then you have to smooth it and temporally like filter it, or is it just kind of good off the shelf?
Now, I have tried a sign board segmentation model to a data set, and it actually make the algorithm worse because it had a lot of recognition miss, and we weren't able to find a segmentation model that was trained specifically on the sign data set. And I think that's why the performance was worse when we use the segmentation model. So I think it's either way we develop a better segmentation model like Keynes for the sign recognition module, or we can, I don't know, apply totally different method for a sign reading algorithm.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next poster, a case study of GAI for accessible design and prototyping. Kate, do you want to do a similar thing? I think it's like it kind of works, yeah. Yes. Here, let me find you here. And yes, please. So, okay, great.
Great. Yes, quickly. Great. Is everybody able to screen? Hi, so I'm Keith Glasgow. I'm a student at the University of Washington, working with Dr. Minkoff, who gave her talk earlier. And this is a case study of generative AI for accessible design and prototyping. For those of you listening, the starting slide has 3 images that actually came from Midjourney of different prototype planters, scarves, and a crocheted stuffed animal. So our motivation for looking into this, generative AI is really growing in popularity. I think we cannot go to a single conference or classroom or talk without hearing somebody mention it, regardless of the industry. I mean, I've even seen it at like a nursery conference, but so it's everywhere. And it's being used to enhance collaboration, productivity, in the workplace. People are using chatbots to help with customer service. People are using things like GitHub Copilot to help with coding. There's definitely been some studies already that show that these enhance productivity and certain, workers, some with earlier experiences and others. But there are concerns that are rising about equity, representation, and ableism that this technology can pose. Some of these can be explanatory, like if the data set is biased, then the kind of content it will be producing will be biased, tools will be inaccessible, but also, we have the opportunity as researchers to help shape, what this technology is used for. And if it can be used for, to help, that would be awesome. There's already existing works out there that explore how generative AI can be used during design and prototyping cycles in fields like software development and architecture and writing and prototyping social networks. And with the intent to explore how generative AI can be used to promote access, we explored a use case for generative AI being used to help enhance the accessibility of the product design cycle through an autoethnographic case study. So I mentioned already a little bit how HCI researchers are investigating the potential of generative AI to prototype. They're using it to prototype social networks and communities through generating fake users and exploring those interactions. There's been work showing how people are using it during the writing process to unblock themselves and help kind of ideate and create short stories. A really interesting work also showed how photorealistic generative AI visualizations can be used in architectural design, helping architects with concept images of something that they may want to explore further. And yeah, all of these clip arts that are shown of there's an image of somebody designing a house, an image of somebody trying to brainstorm, and an image of people around a computer at a hackathon. All the images are AI generated as well. So that's one example. The current prototyping process that we looked at prior to pursuing the case study, we looked at a stage of conceptualization, which is designing what somebody wants to build, deciding if an idea is good or bad. Oftentimes, this is something that's done collaboratively, and you can actually, without investing any time or resources, you can reject something and go a different way. There's sketching, which is kind of given that concept, can you have an idea or visualization of what it would look like, or a visual or an image that you can share with somebody so that it doesn't just live in your own imagination, but you can pass it along. And then pre-development, deciding how to produce an item, and then production. And this particular one, we did decide to focus on sketching just because we've already seen some research on generative AI's use in this kind of early stages, 1 and 2. So some examples of access issues that can arise, which in this case did for a disability like visual spatial learning disability, you may be unable to self-validate if a design is good. So if somebody doesn't have the ability to visualize in their head or has difficulty doing so, or dealing with spatial input in general, if you have a lack of mental imagery, you may think something may be a good concept, but it may not be easy to validate that unless you can physically see it. So the stage of design impacted is concept validation. Then for disabilities relating to motor impairment, there's a bunch of those, include Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and many others. People, can have difficulty holding pen, paper, using computer mouses or styluses, and you may have a great idea of what something may look like in your imagination. You may have a great concept, but how will you share that with others in a way that is efficient and quick and doesn't take too much time? And then, feedback elicitation, coordination is affected in that one. So for this case study, we looked at 3 different methods of the kind of early prototyping, sketching, concept of validation. So in method 1, the participant was using a modification of his existing idea method. They created a low fidelity visual prototype using internet searches of existing content out there, and kind of modifying with Photoshop. For method 2, used the traditional pen and paper prototyping. And then for method 3, used the generative AI tool Midjourney, and they just typed in 1 sentence into the prompt and received the output. So this is a visual comparison. On this slide, I have, there's, I would say 5 different images, but the first one is one of a existing image on the internet overlaid with another one to kind of demonstrate what a lavender husky wearing ski goggles and helmets that's crocheted looks like. And so it's kind of a rough image that's put together. The second one is a sketch done on pen and paper of that. And then the final 4, actually there's 4 images, it's all Midjourney generated photorealistic visual prototypes. And so as you can see, those are of higher quality than either of the 2 before it. And so then in terms of, I guess, satisfaction with the prototype and ease and how long it took to make, the generative AI one was the quickest one to make, and all of that time was just processing time. The user typed in 1 sentence and then received 4 images, whereas each of the other ones did take more hands-on time to make, and they only got 1 as the output. And there is definitely a higher ease of use And then satisfaction was high because they could choose which one that they wanted, and they just felt like it represented their concept more. And of course, this can vary depending on what you're trying. I've heard from others that Midjourney can sometimes require iteration to get to where you want. Yeah, the next steps would be exactly that, to step outside of just one participant in an autoethnographic setting and move towards talking to people with a variety of different disabilities. We covered a few different conditions in this talk, but then other disabled makers and designers may have different limitations, and maybe this tool will help, maybe it won't, but it would be interesting also to know in what circumstances it does help, whether that's at corporate or in a school setting, where is it more appropriate to be used. And so, yeah, that's a little overview. Thank you so much. And yeah, feel free to read the abstract.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes. So, thank you. In your setting, I think the traditional thing you have to do, like sketching, it becomes like this prompting right now in your method. I think the prompting is pretty hard for some people. Like you need a lot of technique. Could you like give a tutorial for them to let them know how to prompt, the appropriate prompting?
In this case, no, it was really done as an experience study. So it's basically like a first time use with no research or education in that area. So we're just trying to see if you give this tool to somebody outside of, how would it work? And that's why it is just a one person, case study. We'll definitely need to see. I think there could be a lot of differing needs in terms of access. And like you said, some things may be a lot harder to prototype than others. They're prompting.
Thank you very much.
For sure.
But actually, that's an interesting question, because maybe the you give a prompt and then you get some sketch, and then you see that you can kind of learn what's a good prompt and what's not, because now the user, I mean, if you make that sketch tactile, for instance, then you get, you're like, okay, a triangle, okay, that doesn't make sense. And then maybe there's some feedback loop that can start happening.
Yeah, I actually should have mentioned the paper that I mentioned where architects were using Midjourney. They chose that tool because it has the highest level of kind of configuration and iteration, and it's meant to be used sort of iterative. Like if you don't like it, you should reprompt. But in this case, there was no reprompting needed for this, but you could definitely see how there would be potentially.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for talking really cool stuff. I was wondering what major drawbacks you anticipate with generative AI with these more traditional prototyping approaches. I imagine the generative stuff like visual accessibility might be more of an issue.
Oh yeah.
But is there any others that you anticipate that would be less desirable?
Yeah, visual. So that's one thing that you mentioned. I think there's in the paper go a little bit over, but there's some kind of in the community, some people don't look at it as an original creation, even though one of the methods we looked at here was modifying existing things as a method of prototyping. There's kind of a question of ownership. If you prototype this, but it's based on somebody else's artwork or work or something that already exists, who really, is it a novel concept or not? That's kind of a big one. And then I think there's potentially conflicting access needs, like you mentioned. Some of these tools are not accessible outside of the box already, and yeah, for sure.
So I did have a question about the intellectual property of this, but you just mentioned that. But the flip side is that these algorithms have been trained off of probably other people's intellectual property in the first place. So
Exactly.
that comes full circle.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. Somebody else had a question.
Any other questions?
Cool. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious. So the method generates 4 different images, and how do you plan to convey the minor differences and nuances to that to someone who has a severe level of visual impairment?
Yeah, that is definitely a great question. Somebody on our team was actually looking at potentially having generative AI describe images. I'm not sure that it's working so great right now. I think there's ways to go, but it would, it's not something that would be done without human involvement. I think right now, and in the paper, I mentioned a little bit that this is very much meant to be just one tool of a human-centered design process. So hopefully whoever is generating these images will also take responsibility in pointing out those minute differences and making sure everybody is aware of them. Yeah, really good question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cool.
And with that, we can go to the next abstract. Great, thank you. Oh. So the next is shared affordance awareness via augmented reality for proactive assistance in human-robot collaboration. Drake, want to, do you have anything to share or?
Can I just use it off the?
Oh, sure, yeah, I think I have your, do I have your? This one, yes?
Yeah.
Let me just share the screen just a sec.
Okay.
Screen share is loading. I think it's good now.
Yeah, it looks
The
good.
Zoom is up.
So hi, everyone. My name is Drake. I'm from Northeastern University. And today I'll be presenting my work, Shared Affordance Awareness via Augmented Reality for Proactive Assistance in Human-Robot Collaboration. So human-robot collaboration is becoming increasingly prevalent in industrial, commercial, and household settings, but it remains a naturally complex problem when robots have to operate in areas with an unstructured environment or when assisting people with limited capabilities due to disability. So as a result, human and robot agents will often enter areas where they are unable to operate. When these agents are attempting to act on an area or object outside of their affordable areas, it's really vital that this state of deadlock is made transparent to both agents. So as a result, they not only have to have knowledge of their own limitations, but also their partner's capabilities in order to proactively request assistance whenever necessary. So as a result, we present an affordance awareness framework that establishes this affordance awareness via a spatial map of a shared environment. Object affordances are computed in terms of reachability to a specific agent, meaning if an agent is able to reach an object, it's assumed affordable. So using RGBD cameras from the robot and from a AR headset worn by the user, we can perceive the environment from both perspectives. So robot affordances are pre-computed using a kinematic model of the robot and a pre-mapped voxel grid of the environment. On the other hand, we model human affordances dynamically throughout the task by monitoring the human's hand actions from both perspectives and using them to create a comprehensive kinematic model of human reachability. Meaning if I only operate in this area, only an ellipsoid around me is assumed to be affordable. If I never reach down low, like on the floor, or never reach up high, like on a shelf, those areas are assumed to be non-affordable to me, and it's up to the robot to then act on those areas to help complete a shared task. So then using these dual perspectives and different models of affordability for both agents, we're able to create a comprehensive spatial map that can then be communicated to both agents through the AR headset. So this will enable both agents to inform their behavior towards collaborative decision-making. Additionally, this AR interface can be used to proactively request assistance from the other agent whenever objects or actions are required to be performed outside of each agent's affordable area. So we propose to evaluate this framework in a household cleanup task where various objects will be scattered around a cluttered environment, so on the floor, on shelves, on the tables. And this would pose a significant challenge for either an individual mobile manipulator or a person with limited mobility to complete the task independently. So we hope that our framework will not only increase task efficiency as measured by task completion time, agent idle time, and number of intent switches, but it'll also reduce mental workload in the human user. And we measure that by a number of intent switches, as well as a number of eye-related measures such as pupil dilation and gaze fixation. And it will also create a more kind of friendly experience for the user that we will record via a series of questionnaires. So yeah, thank you.
Any questions? How do you have some definition for the affordances?
Yeah, so we define object affordances specifically in terms of reachability to a specific agent. Other definition, affordances is a very broad definition. Other papers have used it in terms of like how an object is used. Other have modeled like areas, like how those are used, but we model it in terms of just like, can it be accessed and operated on by an agent? Yeah.
So since we're trying to infer affordances,
Yeah.
I thought the affordances were static, like objects we can do like the set number of things we work the objects, and like you just simply take the region around the campus, take sorry, are you trying to model affordances? Sorry, I think
Okay, no worries.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a couple more. There is a question in the chat. I'm curious about how many people. Oh, that's for me. Richard, we have about 13 people here currently in and out, and I think we'll then take. So we have a couple more. And then we have about 20 people stably in the Zoom room. So we have a couple more posters, and then we'll do the we'll take a break before the later session. The next poster is I think it is Slovo, Russian Sign Language Dataset. Alexander, are you here?
No, I'm here. I am Karina.
Hi, Karina. Do you have slides?
Yes.
Great.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Let me introduce you to our teamwork about the new Russian Sign Language dataset. We are the team from Sber Devices in Russia. I would like to start with a short description of sign language recognition problems. Sign language recognition task is indispensable but daunting due to the tangle and rapid of sign language, which entails intricate hand gestures, body postures, and facial expressions. The complexity of data collection is a major problem of sign language recognition due to a gap between the deaf and hearing community. Besides, there is the need for a different sign language for each country and significantly language differences within even one country. Furthermore, existing Russian sign language datasets can have outdated gestures or be not diverse in classes of signs and subjects. We present two main contributions. As a first, we provide the pipeline for creating a video dataset, which lets us collect the most signer-diverse Russian sign language dataset. Our creation pipeline consists of three main steps: video collection, video validation, and time interval annotation. We use two crowdsourcing platforms throughout the pipeline to increase the number of signers. In addition, before each stage, crowd workers must pass a mandatory Russian sign language exam with a score of at least 80%. The second contribution will list the dataset, which can become the basis for the area. The proposed dataset consists of 20,000 Full HD videos from 194 signers. It was divided into 1,000 frequently used glosses and short phrases in Russian Sign Language, including alphabet and numerals. We trained three models: ResNet 3D as the baseline, SwinLarge and MWinSmall as state-of-the-art models in video recognition to demonstrate the learning ability of the dataset. Several sampling strategies were tested with a different number of frames from the list of 16, 32, 48, and a frame interval from 1 to 4, result in 36 models. 32 frames with a frame interval of 2 are enough for InViz model to be most effective with 64 mean accuracy. We plan to expand our dataset, increase the number of classes and the number of samples per class, and collect not only words, but also phrases, n-grams, and sentences. Some promising future directions include high-quality sentence-level sign language recognition, text-based sign language video generation, sign language video-based speech synthesis, a multilingual sign language model. Here is a demo for the Russian sign language recognition. You can see the phrase "I love you" in Russian. The current dataset, pretend models, and demo are publicly available in the repository. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions? Yes, there's a question. Yes, if it is quick, you can tell me, but
64% sounds like you have a long way to go. Does the sound recognition model get better if you have more data set, or do you have to like do an architecture of the sound recognition?
so the question is, oh, did you hear it? Great.
No, I didn't hear.
Oh, the performance is 64%. Is this because of a small data set? Or would a larger data set fix that? Or do you think there's some other fundamental issues?
Sorry, can I answer in chat? I hard to understand questions.
No, this is a good slide. So it says the best score is 64%. Why do you think it's so low? Is that kind of the...
Sorry, it is hard for me to understand the question.
Sure.
Maybe can you post a question in the chat?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, I understand. I think we can improve it with more data, more sentences, not only words, but phrases and n-grams.
Okay. Great. So I think maybe you get cut off a little bit, but there's some yeah, maybe via email makes sense to do it kind of to answer a little more. Great, thank you so much, Karina. And then we have one final poster, which is assistive navigation via conditional instruction generation.
Yep. I'll share my screen in just a second.
Sure, then we'll take a break and then we will, while you do it, I'll just share the schedule. So at 4:45, so we'll have about 20 minutes for a coffee break. And then we'll have 2 more speakers and the second poster session. You ready, Sunmi?
Yep. Is my screen visible?
Looks good.
Okay. So, hello everyone. I'm Zaming. I'm a student here at Boston University. So here I'm here to introduce assistive navigation via conditional instruction generation. So current embodied vision and language navigation systems generally assumes sighted agents that's able to see the surrounding environment. But the utility of vision and language navigation systems in assisting blind navigators doing complex and outdoor dynamic navigations has rarely been explored. So this is our motivation. So there are two key challenges hindering the development of learning-based assistive navigation systems. So first, it's difficult and costly to conduct real-world user studies. And second, compared to current visual language navigation tasks, the system requires more elaborate modeling of the information that's needed by the blind navigators. Therefore, developing a learning-based assistive system remains to be a challenge. So in order to solve this problem, we first collected a real-world multimodal data set with diverse interaction between experts and blind navigators during navigation in dynamic urban settings. However, real-world data collection is inherently limited with the issue of safety, cost, and data diversity. We therefore supplement our analysis with a simulation environment based on Carla simulator. Compared to other photorealistic navigation-centered datasets, our dataset analyzed contextual cues and guidance instructions for blind navigators. We also emphasize on outdoor navigation involving dynamic obstacles. We then use data to train an imitation model that learns to generate instructional sentences to collaborate with visually impaired individuals on navigation in urban environments. So here we showcase our real-world data set. So our real-world data set consists of synchronized multimodal camera and sensor data together with their corresponding expert instructional guidances. So for the study, we recruited blind individuals and orientation and mobility guides through a local blind individual service center. And then we asked the blind participants to navigate an unfamiliar planned route through a business district, and on a typical weekday traffic, and the whole process is assisted by the orientation and mobility guidance. And the next, we showcase our simulation data set. So we did this using Carla. While Carla is typically used for autonomous driving developments, we modify the environments to collect instructional guidances and in a pedestrian perspective. And because it's a simulation, we can change it with various weathers and towns. And then we use this large synthetic data set to train our model and to generate diverse visual conditions for our next steps. So we construct the task of learning instructional synthesis from observation space, which comprises of a front view camera image, starting position of the instruction follower, and a planned route. Our goal is to obtain a mapping function f, which is parameterized by theta, for generating a sequence of instructional tokens from observations. Our instruction generation model can be trained by minimizing a sequence prediction cross entropy loss L between prediction and expert instructions given observations. Our model comprises of three main components. So first is a visual semantic feature extractor to extract and generate region features and object tags. We then design a goal conditional module, which extracts goal-based feature and leverages navigation commands generated from a future planned path to ease the learning for an alignment among modalities. And in the training process, ground truth instructions are masked and then used together with object tags and commands to generate real-world embeddings. Altogether, we aggregate the inputs with the state-of-the-art BERT language generation module to generate intuitive navigation instructions. Note that the mask instructions are only used for training, and during inference, the model just infers the instruction words without access to ground truth. So for the results, our model demonstrate superior instruction generation results on both real-world and simulation settings compared to existing methods. Our model also achieves high improvements in terms of success rate, route completion, and navigation errors in tasks based on closed-loop simulation evaluations, which indicates the effectiveness of our proposed method. We will introduce more about this simulation evaluation process in later slides. Here we showcase some qualitative results from our open world, real-world data set. So we show the model prediction, the ground truth for both success case and fail case examples. And I'll stop here for a few seconds. And here we showcase the same model prediction ground truth for our simulation data set. And here we show our interactive simulation experiment. We leverage the simulation environment to perform user study to evaluate the effectiveness of our method. So to simulate blind navigation, the participants are shown the user view, which is on the top right corner, with no image, only a course orientation, and with noise and plus maybe collision information when they collide with an obstacle. The participants control the simulated walker by a standard keyboard. And then the instructions shown on the left are provided to the participants based on query. And sorry, let's play this again. Based on query, and then either generated by the instruction is either generated by our proposed process, or it's maybe procedurally generated. We can therefore directly evaluate the ability of the model to guide like in a complex and dynamic environment without risking safety. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions? There is a question, yeah. It's probably best.
Thanks for your presentation. I read your paper several times. It was I really liked your paper. So the question I have is that in your model you input the navigation pathway and the image as input and generate the instruction. But what I think is that the image input is kind of insufficient for understanding the context of the navigation. So let's say, for example, you have you see a bicycle coming in front of you. Then, like when generating navigation instruction, you have to determine whether or not the bicycle is coming to your way or if it's going, it's getting far from you. And was your model able to understand that kind of like context where, like, so it says pan to the left because that bicycle is it's coming on the right, or you don't have to pan to the left because bicycle is going past you. Like, was it able to understand the context of the navigation?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. And it's a really good question. So I think what you're getting at is in context in both spatially, so also temporally, right? Is it able to understand temporal context, whether the scene is moving, objects moving in the scene? So currently our model only deals with a single input frame. So we do not take care of temporal information. So I would say in the current stage, it probably would not deal really well with the scenario you just mentioned. So for example, if a bicycle is moving your way or moving away from you. But I think that's a really interesting direction to pursue in the future. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Great. So I think just to give everyone a break, maybe for like 10-15 minutes, and then we'll resume. There's coffee, I think, somewhere probably on the other side of this building. And then we have 2 speakers. So I look forward to seeing everyone in about 15 minutes.
We have a speaker for the key point track. Do you want to give them some time?
Sure. I might step out for a minute, but they can go ahead. And I think some people might go get some coffee and take a break, as we've been here for like 3 hours. Alternatively, they can also present at the end of the talks too, in around 4:30, 4:45.
Sure. Let's do it like after the coffee break, maybe.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Hey, Jiajun, you can go ahead.
Okay. I will share my okay, I'll share my PPT now. Can you see this PPT?
Yeah.
Okay, I will start presenting this work. First of all, I'm really sorry for late. And so I'm just getting started. So hello everyone, and I'm here to present the second place solution for the AVA key point track estimation. So my team name is iCost, and I'm Jiajun Fu, and I'm on behalf of the team to present our work. So here is the brief introduction of the task. So the task is given an image. We are going to detect and estimate the key points of all people is within that image. And the matrix is calculated based on the average precision of all estimated key points. So we follow the basic classic top-down pipeline. So within that pipeline, there is a people detection, and after the detection for each detection, their detection was cropped, and their key point estimation algorithm is running to extract key points for each detection. So this is the basic pipeline. So for the accuracy and the detection accuracy and the estimation accuracy is both very crucial for the final performance. So we will introduce this part separately. So for the people detection part, the challenge is that not all people are used for their final key point detection. For example, the riders are widely present in this data set, but they are not used for the final key point estimation evaluation process. So we just retrain the detection model to detect the true targets, which is the not disabled people, wheelchair people, and visually impaired people. So we use YOLO-X model with modified CSP-v5 backbone. So during the training, we use like mixed up and mosaic data augmentation. So the mixed up data augmentation is that we randomly choose two images in the training data set, and we mixed them. We use their we use the union of their bounding boxes as the training targets. And the mosaic operation is that we stitch 4 images and randomly choose a patch from the stitched images as the training sample. So for the key point estimation part, we utilize HNIW 48 as the as our key point estimation framework. And in this framework, the final result is a set of key points which indicates the possible distribution of each key point indicates the possible distribution of a certain key point. So we just merge them for better visualization. Doing this training, there is a challenge that the XWord dataset has the different key point format with the COCO one. So the COCO one contains 17 key points, while the XWord contains 65 key points. So it mainly influenced how the feature map is back projecting the heat maps. So within the framework, it is done in the last convolutional layer. So the layer is usually initialized with the COCO pre-train weights. So in the XWord, without any initialization, the last convolution layer may randomly initialize. So to prevent this, we we find the nearest for each key point in the export, we find the nearest point in COCO and copy the weights into that convolutional layer. If there are multiple weights, we just using their mean weights. So another challenge is that this is presented by somebody else. They also find that the flip augmentation and there are some statistical errors in the encoding and decoding process. So unbiased data processing is utilized to prevent this issue. And another problem is that the key point is always inferred by the network based on two cues, the appearance cues, and another one is the body constraint cues. So in order to increase the network stability, to focus more on the topology constraint, inferring the key points based on topology constraints, this will especially helpful for some overlapping people cases. During the training, we randomly mask the key point. So here it presents several operations for the target red, yellow key points, and there are two. So finally, to evaluate our designs, we conduct several ablation studies. So for the pupil detection part, we compare the detection accuracy of the bounding box of the target people, and our baseline is the fast-RCA method. So we can see that our ULX greatly improves the detection accuracy, and therefore the key point accuracy part, and we just evaluate our designed improvement, two improvements separately, which is the weight. We can see that the weight initialization and the AID and UDP separately make improvements for our final model. So and about the final model, so we utilize this full model, and our method ranked second place. So that's all. Thanks for listening. Okay, I'm finished now. So
Cool.
do you have
Thank
any
you.
problem with the? Okay, thank you.
If anyone have any questions, please leave a message in the chat. Otherwise, let's take a break.
Everyone, sorry about that. There was some Wi-Fi things. Okay, so welcome back. We have 2 more talks by Smith Patel. Let me introduce him, and then Richard Bedner. So Smith is a computer science student at the University of Victoria. He has worked extensively as a software developer and AI engineer for several years. He helped co-found Celeste, a company designing smart glasses for individuals with vision loss. And his mission is to stretch the limits of what a person with vision loss can do. And that's part of his ongoing efforts in leveraging technology to empower others in the vision loss community to reach their full potential. Great. So with that, just let's see, maybe that into my laptop. Do you want to sit or do you want to stay? Oh, yeah, that's a big screen right here, and then you're facing the laptop, and there's a microphone here. Here, if you just yeah, and they can see you here. You're so there's like this podium. Great, good to go.
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Smith Patel. I wanted to thank Ash and the CVPR for giving me the opportunity today. I want to continue today's theme, which lies at the intersection of technology and computer vision and inclusivity to make everyday life more accessible. Being a recent computer science graduate and a software developer, I'm deeply passionate about leveraging computer science to empower people for different abilities using for accessibility, as Ash pointed out correctly. During my most recent experience at Celeste, I had the opportunity to lead the tech in the area that I wanted. To give you some base information for Celeste. Celeste is a company that makes smart glasses for people who have severe vision loss. The glasses house a camera, speaker, and a microphone. During my tenure there, I and my team developed a mobile app that used today's computer vision cutting-edge technology to have features to read text, recognize objects, and get scene descriptions on top of the images and videos from the glasses. So here is how it would work. A user could press the read text button on the mobile app. The glasses would send over the image to the phone. The phone would do the processing, and we would send back the results in an audio format through the speakers on the glasses. Now, some of you might be thinking, why smart glasses and just not mobile phones? 2 reasons. One of them being a blind or a very low vision person. Often people have a cane or a guide dog, so their one hand is almost always occupied, which makes it very difficult to hold another thing like a phone and use it to get more information for your surroundings. For example, if I want to read a piece of paper right now, it'd be almost impossible, super difficult to use my phone and hold my cane and get this OCR getting up and running. So that's where the glasses can help. Well, there is a challenge right now. As I mentioned, the glasses use an app. So I devised a short-term solution that we would have a timer. A user can set a timer on the app, and then after they press the read text button, the timer starts counting down. And that's when the timer reaches it, it would take the picture and the read text would work. So users have enough time to get their piece of paper or the object in the other hand positioned correctly. The second reason to use glasses was this might not come intuitively to sighted people, but it is incredibly challenging for someone who has visual limitations to point the phone correctly. And glasses being at the eye level and having a wide point of view, that it helps the users get a more accurate picture of what they want to get a picture of. Yeah, so those are the few reasons why we chose glasses and what the current version of glasses, Celeste glasses, offer users. Some of the things Celeste publicly claim they are working in and are in pipeline features include advanced AI like facial recognition, navigation explore guidance, gestures. Oh, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so facial recognition, navigation explore features, gestures, and video descriptions. Two of the features that I personally am very excited about are navigation gesture guidance and the gestures. Personally, the GPS right now is incredible for navigation, but it has its limitations with accuracy. To a sighted person, that's not a huge issue, but for someone who has severe vision loss, it's very challenging for them to get accurate positioning. That's why the video feed and computer vision with the glasses combined with GPS would be able to help. Even in indoor settings, and there have been a couple talks before me who are primarily researching in this area, which is incredible. The other feature that most of our users are very fascinated about is gestures. The mission with Celeste was to change how we interact with technology. Right now, using technology is a tedious and not very intuitive process, but Celeste wanted to make it more seamless. For example, if we want to use the glasses, even right now, we had to take out the phone, navigate the app, and press the read text button to read text. But we can use computer vision and gesture recognition algorithms to, for example, recognize a pointing gesture, and that's when the OCR gets activated immediately, which would be a very seamless way to use and interact with the glasses. I talked a lot about Celeste and their advanced features. Some challenges that we were facing include, one of the biggest challenge was the data set. And currently all of the data to train these different algorithms and models is based on images and videos that are taken by sighted people. And that might not necessarily translate into images and videos that would be taken by people who have vision loss. The second challenge we have is the limitations on a hardware, which is like to have gestures and a lot of the navigation and explore features. We would need a very high processing capacity and a long battery life to have an extensive use period of time. But that would affect the device and it would make it very bulky, and so it's a very tricky balance to have a sleek device that has a use case of extensive period of time along with most of these features. And I hope the technology in terms of hardware will make it more better in the future. I wanted to also talk a little bit about education and how we can use computer vision to make education more accessible. Being the first and only computer science student who is completely blind at the University of Victoria, it was a challenge for both me and the university. But the university did a really great job supporting me throughout my education. However, there have been a few challenges on the road. One of them was accessibility with diagrams, graphs, images, etc. What we ended up doing was university would hire a person who would manually write written descriptions of, say, a calculus graph or a computer networks diagram or algorithms image or a graph, and the list would go on. But the better way to do this would be taking a picture, and there could be a software or app that would create an interactive sound or haptic based version of the simulation of the same graph, diagram, image, and it would be much more accessible, quicker, and more scalable. Another challenge was following along the professors when they would solve a complex problem on a board. And most of the professors now use an iPad or a tablet, and some of them still use a Blackboard. So the easy solution for professors who are annotating their slides on the iPad is we could have a screen sharing system where the screen reader and OCR or object recognition technology can be combined, and a student can get real-time updates on what the professor is writing, so that student doesn't get lost, as I did in a lot of my lectures. So these are some of the ways we can have computer vision improving education accessibility in STEM, and many more students can get education in STEM, because it's also difficult to scale. Even for an example, for the alternate text team, which is the team that would convert all the materials into alternate text, it's a quite challenging job for them, because for equations in sciences and engineering, they would have to write it in a markup language, something called math ML, and that's a very tedious process. So again, some computer vision techniques can be used there, and that process can also scale up and be made more quicker. Lastly, I would like to point that computer vision can be combined onto screen readers, and they can be merged, so that the applications and web pages that are not maximized for accessibility are still accessible and usable for people who have visual difficulties. To conclude, I would like to end on a note that we can use the power and leverage computer vision to empower people who have different disabilities, to give them their independence and freedom back. Thanks, everyone.
Let's any questions?
Yeah, this is Richard Ladner. Smith, thank you very much. That was really interesting. Both parts of your talk about the glasses and your education, issues with your education. I wanted to ask you about the glasses and when do you expect them to be available? They're not available yet, according to the website. I can put a deposit down, but do you have any idea when they'll be available, or can you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, Celeste has released the glasses to its early pre-orders who have Android phones, and they expect to release to their iOS pre-orders in July. And from what I heard from Celeste, they hope to release their glasses to general population in this fall.
Yeah, I might have a tester for you if you're interested at the University of Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. I could connect them with Celeste.
Yeah, okay, I'll tell them about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
There's another question.
William, so I have a question. Celeste is really awesome as a standalone. I I'm curious, as kind of new technologies emerge, Apple just made their announcement about the augmented reality glasses, and there's virtual reality headsets where, similar type of recognition would be helpful. Do you ever plan to integrate with those technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great question. There's a fundamental difference with Apple glasses or most VR glasses with Celeste glasses. That being on our website, there are pictures of our current glasses, which look very indistinguishable from a regular pair of glasses. And let's say the Apple glasses or the other glasses are a bit bulky, and it's quite difficult to wear them and walk around on a street for extended period of time. So that's a challenge with that technology. As I mentioned in my list for challenges, the hardware is a challenge right now, but Celeste is always welcoming collaborations, and there was a lot of great researchers who gave talks before me. If anyone ever wants to collaborate, then I'll be happy to connect them to Celeste as well.
This is Jennifer Mankoff. I would love to connect as well as Richard.
Thanks for the talk, Smith. Thanks for that wonderful talk. So one question I had was about, so we work a lot on navigation technologies, and I feel like the smart glass solution, if you're sitting down and reading a paper, I think that is a really powerful technology. But when navigating independently, I wonder how you mentioned this problem of facing the camera in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
If you wear the glasses, like how easy it is to face in the right direction or like scan while navigating. For instance, you could mount it. You could mount the camera as a smart glass, or you could mount it on your chest. Do you have any thoughts about like differences or like does that make sense? So
for sure.
Was there some kind of a like prototype version where Celeste was experimenting with different mounts, or they just kind of said this is the right way to go?
Yeah, so from the very beginning, we had the idea to go with the smart glasses. That's a very interesting and great observation that the camera can be mounted on a chest as well. However, what we found out was, especially you mentioned navigation scenario, most of the signs and the labels to set the room are designed to be viewed easily from eyes point of view from a human, right? So having them mounted on the chest, that could be a little bit challenging to capture those signs and the posters or the labels.
That's good. Yeah, thank you. Great. Okay. So let's thank Smith again. And if you just follow me, I'll just hold this up. Yeah, it's okay. Just right here. I'll leave you back in the back there. I think it's our final seat. Okay, so our last speaker is Richard Ladner. Richard is a professor emeritus in the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington. He joined the faculty there in 1971 after receiving his PhD in mathematics from UC Berkeley that same year. He officially retired in 2017, although he's not teaching anymore. He continues his research in accessible computing and advocacy work in advancing persons with disabilities in computing fields. Since 2006, he has been the leader of Access Computing, an NSF-funded project with the goal of increasing the participation of students with disabilities in computing fields. In 2014, he joined with Andreas Stefik to create Access CS for All that works on developing accessible computer science, educational technology, and training K-12 computer science teachers to help them include students with disabilities in their classes. Richard, take it away.
Okay, let me share my screen. And I will share the sound. Remember to do that.
Yeah, great, thank you.
And let's see. Hopefully you have a picture of that.
Looks great.
Okay, so today I just want to talk, I'm not going to be too technical because I'm really not a researcher in computer vision, but I am somebody that really appreciates it and have used some algorithms myself in my own work in accessibility. But I want to talk about including accessibility and disability in an undergraduate computer vision course. And in general, this is part of my work with Access Computing and with Create as well. Jen Menkoff talked about the Create Center earlier today. So why should we include accessibility in a computer science vision course? And for this particular workshop, I think I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but nonetheless, I think these are some of the ideas you can bring back to your departments, to other computer vision people who are teaching this course that don't include anything about accessibility in their course to kind of convince them to do so. So, and on this particular slide, I have a graphic, and it's a line drawing of a young woman looking at her phone, and everything's kind of magnified on the phone. And throughout my slides, I will have different line drawings that we have created at Access Computing just to have some visual content, but realize it is more for just show. But if you are blind, I will give a short description of those as we go on. So reasons to include accessibility in the computer vision course. I think one of the main reasons is that there are 1.3 billion people in the world who have a disability. And that's a number from the World Health Organization. And so it's about 15% of the 8 billion people in the world. So it's not a small group, it's a big group. And so sort of understanding that group and serving that group is important for computer scientists. There's also an industry demand for new employees who know about accessibility, especially with the big companies, Microsoft, Google, Adobe, and so on, that they really are looking for people that know something about accessibility. They don't have to be experts, but they should have some of the fundamentals. I'll talk a little bit about industry more in future slides. So accessibility considerations present interesting computer vision problems that people don't often think about. And so it's a way to include sort of interesting computer vision issues at the same time as talking about disability and accessibility. And finally, another reason is broadening participation in computer vision because accessibility relates to social good. And there's a lot of evidence out there that getting more women, getting more African Americans, getting more Black people, and of course this is a world organization, the CVPR, but I think everyone's interested in diversifying our field and making it more diverse. And so doing computing for social good is a good way to do that. And accessibility is one of those social goods. So there is a graphic on this, just of an eyeball I found. Computer vision technology plays an important role in creating access. And we heard a lot about it today, actually, in the short talks, in the earlier talks, and so on. One of the early ones is optical character recognition. I'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. Text identification and images, that's important. Automatic image annotation, so you know it's in an image, and maybe you can get a description out of that. Automatic audio description of video. Tactile access to images. So people who are blind, how do they get access to those images? And then sign language recognition and translation is the last one on my list here. So these are all, computer vision technology plays a role in all of these 6 items. So what to include in your course? And here is another graphic of 2 women talking to each other at their computers. Both have low vision. So one thing about computer vision, there's a historical background, that some of the problems in computer vision that people have looked at were inspired by accessibility. And so it's important to kind of, in all our courses that we teach, to talk about sort of the history and how these problems became important. There's also alternative access to images and video. So just thinking about people who need to have access to image and video that can't see it, I think is something that you can include, and what that entails. A discussion about uses of computer vision for social good. So that could be included in the course. And I hope all computer vision courses do that anyway, because I think that's a good way to inspire people to continue doing more computer vision, because it does social good. And then there's interesting student projects that you can give. And there's many. You have to be careful, of course, with any computer vision student project that is doable, in a short amount of time, or, in 6 months or less. And briefly, I think everybody knows about what accessibility is, but I always like to bring this up because it's a little more complicated than you might expect. So there's really kind of a dual meaning for accessibility, and this has to do with industry and research. So one definition that you hear a lot is making mainstream technology accessible through existing enabling technologies that exist on computers. So this is about computer accessibility. And the companies I mentioned earlier are all interested in that. And then there's creating new enabling technology to help make lives better for people with disabilities. And I think that's what most of us in accessibility do. Somebody had to build the first screen reader for blind people so they can access computers and so on. And this is just a list it's not complete even, for the various platforms for Mac and iOS, for Android, and for Windows. And there's also special devices as well, of all the kinds of different access methods. And that would be for blind, for deaf, for people that have mobility issues, and so on. And I'm not going to go through the whole list here. I just want to show you that all these affordances are available out there to people with disabilities. And even though these affordances exist, unless the applications are built to support, that is, use these affordances, applications won't be accessible. And so somebody, of course, had to invent these affordances over time, and that's kind of the researchers that we are. So I'm going to talk about blind access to images and video, and this is something you could teach in your class. And again, I have another line drawing of a blind person reading some Braille, it looks like. It's a kind of a nice line drawing. So how do you sense with less or no vision? Well, if you have low vision, you could use magnification, so that could make your image bigger. But of course, magnification might entail, because images are digital, you're going to get some distortion because, the pixels, if you like, get larger, and maybe you can make them smoother. So this is maybe a little more computer graphics, but magnification isn't a panacea. Also, people can improve contrast, because a lot of people have difficulty with contrast. Even, I would say, most older adults have that because of cataracts and other issues like that. And then if you're blind or you don't have low vision, then one sense you could use is your hearing. And so speech from text or image description. So if there's text in an image, you could read the text. If it's doesn't have text or it has some other things besides text, you could have an image description. So that's one kind of output that could be giving you understanding of an image. Another one is some sonification. I think that's been talked about today. If it's semantically meaningful, it might be helpful. And then finally, touch from example, embossed images are braille for text. So if you can hear and you can touch, you can get information that's in an image. Maybe you get it more slowly and you have to do some integration because your field of view is so small, being at your fingers. So I want to talk about optical character recognition, because this is, I feel like, one of the oldest ideas about computer vision. And it really goes back to, the 1920s, before we had computers, and people were trying to build recognizers for characters so they could translate from one form to another, for example, for doing telegraph communication. And it's, today I sold this image off the web. You scan a document because it's, and then you get a scanned image file, or you might start with a scanned image file. And this is the text, it has text on it. And then you use the OCR to get the actual text, and now you have a text document that could be read with a screen reader. So this is computer vision. And interestingly, when I gave a lecture in a computer vision course, they didn't know that this was computer vision. I asked the students, what about optical character recognition? So this is kind of a fundamental thing that could be discussed. And of course, it's very useful to have a text document instead of just an image, a digital image of text. And you can go back to the 1970s, and this machine called the Kurzweil reading machine was invented by Kurzweil, who was a very famous guy. And it was an example of optical character recognition used for blind people. Of course, it used both optical character recognition and speech synthesis, so that somebody could put a page of text at the top of this thing and then have it read out loud. And so it would scan the image, just like in that picture I had earlier. So this kind of technology became very useful for blind people through this Kurzweil reading machine. Of course, you can do this kind of thing with your smartphone nowadays. It's not, you don't need something the size of a small refrigerator. And then there's text recognition within images, and that's very useful. I think that came up today in that last talk with those glasses. So you'd like to see what the text, what a street sign says, what's on the menu at a restaurant, and so on. Of course, a menu might be mostly text, but if thinking about images out there that have text in them, that information in the text is very valuable. And here's an example of some work I did more than 10 years ago, where we tried to identify text in just graphical images in textbooks. And this is from, I think, a pre-calculus book. And it did a pretty good job of identifying the things that are identified that are text are circled in, not circled, they're squared, I guess, in red. But there are some mistakes. You can see the plus on the right there is not circled in red, and that should have been, and so on. But and if you look at office there, I think the problem, of course, seemed to be that the machine didn't learn about those letters looked like they're merging together, the two F's, and so on. So it had trouble with that as well. So whatever you're going to do to find characters is going to be error prone, because your training set might not have the information about the characters, or thinking of these characters as connected components, that they're connected, except for things like I and so on, I and J, that have dots. And then once you have those characters, and so there's another graphic on the left here which shows the characters outlined, then you can move to try to get lines of text, which you could then send to OCR to get optical character recognition. And then you could convert these text lines to Braille to put them back into the image, so make that accessible. So that's an example of work I've done more than 10 years ago to identify it. But of course, we've seen more things since then, like those glasses we just saw. Also, there's text in the wild. I think this is what the glasses are about. That if you have a sign here, this one happens to be, it looks like it's in Paris or someplace because it's French. And this is an application from deepdetect.com. It has the text in red boxes, and it actually has a label which reads out that text. And so you could perhaps read a street sign if you had those wonderful glasses that we just heard about. So identifying text in the wild is kind of very good and very important. So these are what I just talked about were things that could be talked about in a computer vision class. And they could turn into projects for students. Now I'm going to talk about automatic image description. So this is, rather than tactile feeling the image, this would be getting an audio description of it. So here's an example of the sort of pipeline at the top here. You start with some kind of object recognition within an image. Of course, that includes text, some image annotation, so those objects can be identified and you can annotate them. And then from that, maybe generate an image description. I don't think this is a solved problem, but this is something you could talk about. And the example here is a picture of an elephant that has many components to it. It's pushing looks like a soccer ball around. It's walking forward. There's a man on top in a red shirt. And this has about, I think it has 16 annotations around it with bounding boxes. And so how could you take this, what computer vision does, and turn it into English? Now, this is maybe NLP and not computer vision, but I think they're kind of connected, that the computer vision maybe should be finding the important things in the image, because maybe the important thing is the elephant kicking a ball with its trunk with a man sitting on top, and nobody cares that there's a roof in the background, or that the elephant has a leg, and so on. So the computer vision gets you everything you want, but then you want to filter that down. So maybe the computer vision can pick out the important parts, and that could be talked about as well. Now there's tools for blind people to take pictures with annotations. There's something called Tap-Tap-See, which is Android and iOS. There's Lookout Assisted Vision on Android and Scene ID on iOS. And I think all these are free. And I recommend you try them, and your students could try them. And you can talk about, well, how do they do this? Is it the appropriate thing? Is the UI, the user interface, or how it interacts with the blind person, is it a good thing? And so on. So I think, these are things that students could do in a classroom to see how computer vision works in real life. I want to talk about automatic audio description of videos. So here's a video. I'm going to play a little bit. It's audio described just to show you what it is. This is Welcome to Earth official trailer. It's with Will Smith, and it has audio description. I'm going to play this a bit. And
a 6-part Disney Plus original series. Will Smith steps out of a red SUV.
I've got a confession to make.
Words appear over a blue and green sphere from National Geographic.
I've never climbed a mountain.
Will rappels down a volcano. Academy Award nominee Darren Aronofsky.
Never swum in a lake.
Academy Award nominee Will Smith.
I was in a cave once.
Will stands on a boat staring out at the vast ocean.
I'm beginning to think that I might be missing something. Will, ready? Yes, sir.
In a small plane, Will fist bumps a man.
I asked the best modern-day explorers, take me to the ends of the...
Okay, let's go back to the slideshow. I think I can just advance the slide.
A 6-part
I don't
Disney...
want to do that. Okay, let's do it this way. Okay, So you saw the audio description, which was integrated into the dialogue, and anything that was text on the screen was audio described. And that's kind of the standard. So can audio description be automated? That's the question that you could ask your students. And what would be the issues in doing so? What's the important visual information in the film that you would like to talk about in the audio description? Can the script, which contains scene information, be used? So now this probably wouldn't be a trailer, but it might be the whole movie. You have a script that describes things that are going on. Maybe that can be used as part of the thing. Maybe that's less computer vision, or it could be combined with computer vision. How is the audio description fit in between the dialogue segments? Again, that's maybe not computer vision, but remember that last thing we showed, well, if you did this annotation, you get all this information. Well, you have to pick from it what, in the limited time I have to add a description. What do you put in there? What's the most important thing? It seems like an art, but could it be automated? Can blind people be involved in the creating of audio descriptions in the first place? So how would a blind person do that? And actually, people have investigated this, and there are some papers. I don't have any references here, but there are a few papers about this. And then there's tactile access to images. We talked about audio description, so you might have tactile access. And you could talk about that. So tactile perception can lead to a visual model in the brain. I think this is important to understand. That here's a picture of a hand sort of traversing a parabola, just a line in the shape of a parabola. So a blind person using their fingers can't see all the parabola at once, but they can feel it. And that's just one hand. They could have two hands, and feel it if it were embossed. And then they could get the mental model. That's the arrow goes to the right to the brain, and there's a picture of a parabola superimposed on the brain, which is to indicate that there's a, sort of a visual model of the parabola in the brain. And there's a lot of evidence, and here's one paper that shows some evidence of the activation of the primary visual cortex by Braille reading in blind subjects. So they're actually using their visual cortex. It's not gone dormant just because they're blind. So there is some neuroscience that kind of verifies that this integration can happen. And there are different kinds of embossers. On the left here is I think it's View Plus Rogue Sheet Specialty Tactile Graphics Braille Printer. What a long name. We have a similar one at the University of Washington to do tactile graphics for blind students. In the center is a PIAF graphics marker, and there's somebody putting a image into it. Looks like a graph image from like a calculus book or linear algebra book or something like that. And that's just a printed image on special paper called swell paper. And you put it into that device and it heats up the swell paper, and what's black or darker gets embossed and it gets raised by the paper swells. And so you get the embossed. And it works actually with black printed Braille as well. And the far right is a device, something like the one that was talked earlier today. It's called Graffiti, and it's a refreshable display for graphics. And it has like a little Braille keyboard on top. It's a computer of some kind. I've never tried this one myself, but I will tell you that the resolution is very low. And so there are, the graphic that I'm showing you that the swell paper is doing wouldn't work very well on this machine because the dots are so big and so far apart. So there are ways to get output that is readable. And this is some work I did in the past. On the left is a picture of a graph from a pre-calculus book. And it shows the intersection of 4 lines, basically. One is the line, not the intersection of the line, it's the intersection of the areas, the area where x plus y is less than 20, x is less than 15, y is bigger than 0 and x is bigger than 0. So that delineates actually a quadrilateral, which is shaded in yellow. And it does show that the bounding lines, the x-axis, the y-axis, x equals 15 and x plus y equals 20. And so on the right is a black and white and gray version. So what's yellow is turned into gray, and all the text is turned into Braille. Some of the text is angled. In the original one, well, there is no such thing, angled Braille. It doesn't work, so you have to straighten it out there. So all the equations and all that is put onto this tactographic. And then it could go through swell paper, or it could go through a tactographics printer, or one of those refreshable Braille devices, although I don't think it would work that well on that because of the resolution. So this transformation from an image to tactographic, this is generally done by hand, but you can automate it. And how much can you automate it? That's what I studied more than 10 years ago. So this gives you an idea of that. And here's an example where on the left is it's just a line that goes through the points 0, -3, and 1, -3/2, shown on a XY axis plus the grid behind it. And this would be so fussy for tactile access because there's so many lines. And so you'd like to have fewer lines. So could you automate it so that it understands this picture and removes all those grid lines and just leaves the X and Y axis and the line and the points and so on? And in the work I did, we weren't able to do that automatically, but we were able to do it by hand, and still make progress. So tactile graphics issues. And again, I have another line drawing of another blind person reading something that's tactily accessible. It looks like it might be a Braille, it could be tactile graphics. So tactile graphics should be simple. We know that. Tactile graphics needs to include text. It needs some way to get to the textual information in the tactile graphic. It could be Braille or it could be speech. I think in an earlier talk, there was a talk about multimodal output device where I guess it was just a touch screen where you could touch it and it speaks where you're touching. But there's nothing embossed on a touch screen. A single book can contain more than 1,000 images and figures. So how could you do that in an automatic way as easily as possible? How to do tactile graphics efficiently? How to simplify images for tactile access? All these things are tactile graphics issues that some of them could be discussed in your computer vision class, because they are about computer vision. Simplifying an image is about taking an image and making it simpler. And this is the book we worked on. This is called Advanced Mathematical Concepts. It's just the book cover image there on the right. And we were able to do about 1,000 images in the books in about 6.3 minutes per figure, human time. And so that was kind of correcting the mistakes that machine learning did, and then also doing the simplifications that had to be done by hand. And we wrote about that back in 2007, more than 10 years ago. And the final one I'm going to talk about is sign language recognition and translation. And that was actually talked about earlier too, for the Russian language, I was definitely there to listen to that one. And this is more recent work I'm doing. And again, we have a line drawing of two people talking to each other in sign language. And I want to distinguish sign language recognition from translation. Recognition really means identifying individual signs, and you might have them already sort of separated out of some stream of signs. And then translation is different. It's taking the sign language. Of course, you get these words or concepts in order, in the sign language order, but that might not be the same order as a spoken language. And so you'll have to translate it. So it's just like normal language translation, which we know a lot about how to do today. So that's more like NLP, and so on. So translation is more natural language processing, and recognition is more computer vision. So there are a lot of challenges. There's hundreds of sign language around the world. None of them have really standard written forms that everybody learns. They're not linear. They're not just one word after another, but they're spatial temporal. And I don't have time to explain how sign languages are not just word after word after word. They are very different. Sign languages are part of deaf culture. And so one has to be careful when you're doing work in another culture that you're not abusing that culture in any way. There are very few large sign language data sets. I think the one I heard about today was 20,000 instances, I believe. So they're not very big. There's thousands of computer vision research papers on sign language recognition and translation. I did a little search on Google and I found 3,440 with sign language recognition in quotes in the title, and 706 with sign language translation. I don't have time to read all those papers. There are some summary papers, but I'm sure they didn't read all those papers either. So there might be some gems in there among them, but almost all of them are machine learning type papers, computer vision type papers, except they're going from video instead of individual images. Of course, the video is a sequence of individual images, and so you have to figure out how to do that. So my final thought is you can include accessibility in your computer vision course, and students will benefit from it. And please talk to your colleagues that teach computer vision and tell them about some of these things. I have some resources here. There's an organization called Teach Access, which is about teaching accessibility generally. It was founded by industry, and so you can look that up. I think, are my slides going to be available? Like, if they are, then there's a link there, or you can do a Google search and find it. There's my own project, Access Computing. We have a Teach Access page there that has information. There's a CACM article that I wrote a couple of years ago called Broadening Participation by Teaching Accessibility. So that sort of amplifies that argument I gave earlier about broadening participation. And then many of you know that there's a new ACM IEEE Computer Society AAAI curriculum 2023 that's coming out, and they are interested in about including accessibility in the curriculum. So you can read about that as well. And you can do a Google search to find that curriculum. I think it's called just search ACM IEEE AAAI curriculum 2023 and you'll find it. And then coming soon, I think Jen mentioned this earlier, that Access Computing, Amy Coe, myself, and a grad student are working on an online book on teaching accessibility with chapters for many standard computer science courses, including computer vision. I think we have planned 17 different chapters, one for each one. And I tried to write the one on computer vision. I think it needs more work, but it should be coming out in the near future by the end of this year. So it's going to be an online book, and it'll be a live book, and somebody can go in and, not just edit what I did, but write a better one sometime. So I'm open to questions now, and I don't think I need my slides anymore.
Great, thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for the brilliant talk. Any questions? Yes. Just a second. Sorry, can you hear her?
No.
Do you mind coming forth?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your presentation. I was just curious why you think people don't include accessibility currently in the computer vision courses.
because at least in my university, University of Washington, I can't generalize from one, but I just don't hear about it. They don't know about it. It's not in the textbooks. So that's my reasoning. Do you know something different that I don't know?
Oh, no, definitely not. I was just curious, because in like my computer vision courses, it was also just very technical. We didn't really talk too much about like how these could be used, but I was just wondering if you had any, I don't know, ideas or thoughts.
Well, yeah, I think the thing I said earlier, that what brought computer vision into the world? I mean, why is it useful? And I think that's something that, you know, every course should do. Not just start out and just be technical from day one, but, you know, give some arguments why people should even study it. And one of them would be accessibility. So I think that's, you know, you don't isolate accessibility, you make it just part of the whole story. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Actually, that's a good question. I have a follow-up. But so is there like some I mean, so I teach a robotics class, and you know, we don't have any individuals with vision impairments as students, but you mentioned the organization that's publishing your textbook. Is there some statistics of trends, perhaps, of students that are engaging in STEM classes or university STEM classes? And is there some trends? So for instance, maybe there's an increase of participation, or do you know if there's...
By people with disabilities, you mean?
So for instance, individuals with visual or hearing impairments that are taking CS classes at University of Washington or other universities, is there someone who's like, is there some data that keeps track of this?
Yeah, well, you know, part of access computing, I mentioned that, you mentioned it actually in your introduction. We have a student base that we've maintained over the last 15 years. And these are the active students at mostly, of course, in the United States, because it's National Science Foundation funded. And among those, I don't know about the growth in terms, I have to study that, because a subset of our students that we've worked with are blind or visually impaired. And so I would say it's probably around 5% to 10%. So I think, I don't know, that's a question I could answer, but I haven't analyzed our data. But we've always had a lot of them. In fact, I know quite a few personally, because I'm just thinking of three people who are totally blind, who got their PhDs in the last year. One is a professor at University of Illinois, one's in the job searching right now, and another one went to Cornell. So they're at all levels.
Right.
And there's a famous computer vision guy from Berkeley. I don't know if he's still there. His name, I can't remember, but he has very low vision. Somebody in the audience might know who he is.
Do you feel like coding or needing to code in something like Python, is that an accessible experience, or there's like sufficient tools to make that an accessible experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, Python, of course, has its own issues because it uses indentation to indicate structure, which is like blank space, right? And so you have to turn your screen reader on to make sure you got that correct, those blank spaces. So Python is not perfect. Now there is a language called Quorum, the Quorum programming language, which was invented by Andreas Stefik. And you also mentioned that in the introduction. And the Quorum language was born accessible. And so it's accessible from day one. And it's a very nice language. And it's being adopted, for example, by the state of Maryland, because there's a law in the state of Maryland that says that computer science classes have to be accessible, visually accessible. So they have to convert all their curriculum, computer science curriculum, to be accessible using the quorum language. I don't know if you guys know what code.org is. So code.org is one of the biggest trainers of computer science teachers in the United States. And of course, they're trying to go international, I believe, as well. Anyway, their curricula is totally not very accessible at all in terms of blind access. And they're having to redo the whole thing because they want to make sure that it's accessible. So I'd say the pathway to more accessible programming is there. It's happening. And you really want this to be at the K through 12 level, because you don't want to block people right there. You want to make sure they're included. I mean, you know, when I got my PhD, there were just a few computers in the world, you know, and, you know, it wasn't in K through 12 at all. And now it is, and growing like mad all over the world, not just in the United States, in Canada, everywhere.
Great. Well, thank you again, Rich. Any other questions? Or there's one more question from Smith.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you want to approach? Oh, there's an obstacle in the way. I think you're good here. You can hear you.
Oh, hi, Richard. Thank you for your talk. I really liked it. I wanted to expand on the previous questions. So you talked a lot about teaching accessibility in a computer science class, but have you or are you aware of any research that would make the classes itself more accessible? Just not computer vision, but like AI or ML classes in general.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's sort of we're distinguishing between teaching accessibility and teaching accessibly. You know what I mean? Sort of distinction there. So you're talking about teaching accessibly. Geez, I believe, remember I talked about all those affordances earlier? A lot of them are for blind people, screen readers and stuff like that. I think the answer for, at least for blind people, is, you know, things like tactile graphics, things like screen readers, all those affordances make sure that the class is compatible with all those affordances. So, and that would be textbooks as well. I think most images that are used in computer science textbooks can be converted to a tactile version because I mean, the whole point of those images is to make things simpler for people, and so they don't want them to be too complicated. There's exceptions to that, I'm sure, but yeah, so I think some of the things computer vision can help in making computer science more accessible for students with disabilities, particularly blind students, and so on. There's also something called universal design for learning, which is, you know, it's more used in K through 12, but it could be used at the college level as well. It's not a technology, though. It's more of a pedagogy approach to pedagogy.
Right. So here what I noticed is you mentioned about making the existing course content more accessible in terms of with screen readers or tactile image descriptions. But would there be any ways where the curriculum itself is maybe modified or upgraded in such a way that it's accessible? Because even right now, the way that all of the computer science, ML, or computer vision classes are taught, it includes a lot of math, and there is a lot of graphs, and there is so many things, and the tactile image descriptions haven't gotten to most universities' accessible learning centers. So it's particularly not very, you know, motivating because of the nature of how tedious it is for someone like me to just carry on with those classes.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think, because the blind population is so small that, a university might have one blind student or none for a while and then have one. And so they lose their touch. Now, the University of Washington has a Access Technology Center. And so they keep up with the technology. They keep up with what's possible. But even they, if you have a textbook with 1,000 images in it, that's always going to be a challenge. By the way, there are companies out there that will, if you like, do that work, but it's very expensive. It might be $30,000 to $40,000 a book.
Yeah, thank you.
I wish I could say be more positive. I think computer vision can help make it easier to make tactile graphics, make it easier to do audio descriptions, make it easier to do descriptions of images. And this is artificial intelligence and so on. So I think these are that can be built up.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. So I think with that, so here. Okay, Richard, we'll let you go, but thank you. But obviously I have tons of other questions, but for next time.
Well, anybody has a question, they can email me, and I'm easy to.
Great.
My email is out there publicly. And so I'm really happy to get any kind of questions from anybody. And of course, I know a few people on this call and probably in the room there already. And I would like to be able to contact Smit Patel if there's a way I can get that contact information.
Yeah, and he's waving as well, so I think we can make that connection.
Yeah, and he can find me. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks again, Richard, for the talk and for your time. There was one additional challenge winner. Are they still here? I think they left, right? There's some time zone with China that was too much. Okay, so I think with that, thanks everyone for being part of really interesting workshop. So yeah, very glad to have everyone here. We can go downstairs and continue the discussions around the poster session in physically. And with that, yeah, I wish you a good evening. So thanks everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you
Zoom
for
people.
including hybrid participation in this. It was nice to be part of it.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And please share the contact information as well with me for Celeste.
For sure, I'll send it later tonight. We'll send it.
Bye.
Thank you.